Good evening. For weeks, we've watched the politicians slugging it out together. Tonight, at last, we hear the voters' verdict as they tell us who's won. If the opinion polls through this campaign are borne out tonight, we're likely to see one of the biggest political upsets since the Tories were swept out of office in 1945. It is, at any rate, going to be a very, very exciting political night. We are already at all the places that matter. The count at Sedgefield for Tony Blair, his Labour club, with the Tories in Huntingdon, with the Liberal Democrats in Yeovil. We'll be following the party leaders, we'll be at the party headquarters, we'll be at the key marginal seats where the battles are being fought and people are discovering whether they've lost or won. In a moment, when the polls close, I'll bring you what I really promise is the last poll of this election, our exit poll based on talking to people today as they came out of the voting booths and said how they'd cast their vote. The last poll, that is, before we add up the real votes. All through the night, politicians will be coming here and be called to account by Jeremy Paxman.
Yes, over the next 18 hours we shall have a succession of victors, vanquished and walking wounded up here to explain what went right, what went wrong and what happens now in their respective parties. We'll be joined in a moment by Michael Portillo, with us already Neil Kinnock and David Steele.
And here all the results are phoned into us from across the country. We don't jump the gun, we wait till the returning officer has announced them. We're not even going to guess the very safest seats. And when the facts are marshalled, they're given to Peter Snow, who will illustrate what's happened on the battlefield.
Yes, David, and we'll be illustrating this battle for power in a more adventurous and inventive way than we've ever done before. And of course, the battle will be won or lost in these key battleground seats, all blue in the last Parliament, Conservatives defending themselves against Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Nationalists, the Welsh Nationalists, and so on. And how many of these seats will Labour manage to turn red tonight, the Scottish National Party yellow, and the Liberal Democrats gold in their contest to cross Downing Street and open the door to number 10? As the results come in, we'll be looking at the hows and whys of this election and watching to see whose picture will be there on the stairs of number 10 above Margaret Thatcher's and John Major's. Will it be John Major again, or will this space be occupied by Tony Blair? David.
It's not just the way we vote that we'll be looking at, it's why we voted the way we did in different parts of the country. Our experts up there are looking at all of that, and Peter Kellner will tell all. And over here at the round table with me, Robin Oakley, the BBC's political editor, will be looking at the battles that lie ahead, and Professor Anthony King of Essex University will place this, which could well be the last general election of this century, into context. And in addition to many correspondents, we have one special roving reporter tonight, Frank Skinner.
Hello, David. We're in mid-air at the moment. Where are we, Alec?
Right over Pontefract now.
There you go. I might pop down for a cake. We're going to get to Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham. I'm going to get the word on the street. I'm going to supply a sort of a low-brow, down-at-heel counterpoint to your intellectual analysis in the studio. So I'm sort of BBC's bit of rough for the night. And it's still light in the north of England. Isn't that odd?
We'll be back with him later on. And two battle-hardened correspondents back at the front line tonight, John Simpson at Sedgefield with Tony Blair and Kate Adie with John Major at Huntingdon. John.
Well, this is Newton Aycliffe Sports Centre, which is at the heart of Tony Blair's constituency. And indeed, behind me, there is a definite air of excitement. People are expecting that the vote for possibly the next Prime Minister is about to be counted any moment, and there could be a turnout of 82%.
And Kate Adie.
Well, here in Huntingdonshire, the Conservatives are at least happily confident of re-electing John Major. It is one of the safest seats in the country. But on the wider scene, we're going to have to wait about 5 hours until we hear from the Prime Minister himself.
Thanks, Kate. And as Big Ben strikes 10, the polls close, we can give you the results of our exit poll. We've spoken to 14,000 people in 200 constituencies tonight, and we hope they've been telling us the truth. There it is, 10 o'clock, and we say Tony Blair is to be Prime Minister and a landslide is likely. And reaction from Sedgefield already down there on the right in the Labour Club. All applauding there. Conservative Party headquarters, rather more sombre scenes. So here are the details. Tony Blair to be Prime Minister, and this is why. Labour, 47%. The Conservatives, 29%, according to our exit poll. That would be the worst result, not just this century, but if you care to go back that far, to the Tory vote after the Great Reform Act in 1932, when they were led by the Duke of Wellington. The Liberal Democrats on 18%, pretty much what they did at the last election, others on 6%. We're joined by John Prescott. Well, Mr. Prescott, it looks as though you've done it this time.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. They look very wonderful results, but that's just an exit poll. We set out to win in those 90 seats. That was our strategy area, and if we win there, we'll be very, very satisfied.
You don't look like a man who's been having bad news all day, Mr. Prescott.
No, I mean, the polls have been remarkable. People have been queuing. We've heard these stories all around the country. Clearly, there's going to be a high turnout, but nevertheless, we have to wait and see what happens. If we can win those 90 seats that we set ourselves out to do 2 years ago, we'll be more than happy with that.
OK, Mr. Prescott, if you could stay with us a second, we're just going to hear the full details of our exit poll from Peter Snow.
Well, I mean, David, John Prescott is, of course, absolutely right. This is just an exit poll, but my goodness, it has to be terribly wrong for the Tories to win this election. 47% the Labour share of the vote if our exit poll is anywhere near right, the best since 1966. 29% the Conservatives, as you said. We've never had anything like that since 1832, when the Duke of Wellington led his party to defeat them. In 18% for the Liberal Democrats and 6% for the others. Also, incidentally, that 18% lead by Labour over the Conservatives, bigger even than the record lead that Clement Attlee had over Winston Churchill in 1945. Now, the changes that would represent on the last general election, here they go. Labour up 12% on last time. The Tories down 14%. No change for the Liberal Democrats, and 1% up the others. You'd expect that. Lots of other people contesting this time like a referendum party. Now, let's bring down our swingometer and see what all that means. Here it comes. Now, these are all the vulnerable red Labour MPs vulnerable to a Tory swing. Needn't worry about them, I don't think. These are the blue Conservative MPs vulnerable to each point of swing to Labour. What would happen if there were no swing at all? There'd be a Conservative majority, we estimate, on the new boundaries of something like 27. Now, these are the blue Conservative MPs who turn to red seats for Labour for a swing of 4.5%. Something like 55 of them would go red, and that would be Mr. Blair back with a bare majority. But the swing our exit poll is suggesting, just watch this. On it goes. Look at those blue seats turning red. They go on and on and on, more than 100 of them, until you get to 13%. Now, that swing, if it was precisely accurate, uniform all over the country, would see Labour in with a majority of very nearly 200. But just take the band of error. Don't forget, these exit polls can be 2% out in either direction. They can be even more than that if they're very wrong. But if they're 2% out of the margin of error, then at the bottom end of our swing, it's 11% to Labour. But look, Labour with a majority of more than 100 with an 11% swing. If the swing was at the top end of our band of error, at 15%, then Labour would be in with a majority of over 200. It'd be something quite unique for the Labour Party, and a record, certainly, since 1945. There we are then, a 13% swing, and it's even worse than that for the Tories if our exit poll is anywhere near right, because we're getting messages from the detail of the poll that there's a lot of tactical voting going on, that the Liberal Democrats may do better than the national swing of the seats they're chasing, and also the Tories are doing badly in their own seats, David.
Thanks very much, Peter. Look, the ballot boxes already arriving at Sunderland South, being rushed in. Sunderland South making a point always of trying to be the first to declare, and actually a very useful seat because it'll give us the first indication of whether this landslide we're talking about is actually going to happen in reality. 57 minutes is the all-time record from the close of poll to getting a result in. That would mean 3 minutes before 11 o'clock. We'll see whether Sunderland beats that. But we're joined now by Dr. Brian Mawhinney, the chairman of the Conservative Party, the man who led this campaign. Dr. Mawhinney, it's not a very good exit poll for you. It does look as though you've lost.
Well, the country has made its decision, David. We have a new government. We simply have to wait to determine the government that is, which choice the British people have made.
Are you saying that you accept that Labour has won?
No, I'm saying that when the polls closed, all of those votes in ballot boxes up and down the country constitute a new parliament. They constitute a new government. That may be a government led by John Major, or it may be a government led by Tony Blair. All the speculation, in a sense, is over. We will find the result fairly soon. I'm a patient man.
But are you saying you think there's a chance Mr. Major has won? Surely your own polls tonight are telling you that's not possible, aren't they?
No, I'm saying that the people have already decided. We simply don't know the judgment that they have passed, but we will know it soon enough, and I'm happy to wait until that judgment has become clear.
So you're satisfied with the way you fought the campaign and with the outcome?
You're asking me to speculate on the result. As I've said, I think we should now wait until all of those ballot papers are counted. We will know soon enough who is going to be governing this country for the next 5 years.
Looking back on the campaign, Dr. Mawhinney, were you happy with the way it went all the way through? Are there things you'd like to have done differently?
Now, if you'll forgive me, David, I don't think that this is the moment to start reflecting on the campaign. We have just put our case to the people, as have the other political parties. And in a democracy, the people will decide. We will all accept that judgment and we will move forward. There'll be time enough to reflect on the last 6 weeks and months in due course. Tonight, we're now waiting patiently to learn what decision the British people have come to.
Well, Dr. Mawhinney, I hope we can talk to you later on in the evening when it's all a bit clearer. You're looking remarkably cheerful for a man who's heard our exit poll, so perhaps you know something that we don't, but we shall discover that. Thank you very much. And John Prescott, could we just go back to this result that we're forecasting, a landslide on a scale not seen, and the Tories down to the kind of vote they had at the first part of the 19th century. If that were all true, how would you feel? It must be remarkable for you after years battling away in the wilderness.
Well, after losing 4 times, to win will be sufficient. Make no mistake about that. We set that target for 90 seats. We saw that the campaign was going very, very well for us, and we thought that we could win that. Now, beyond that, we have to wait and see what the poll is. But to win is important, and it looks as if we're going to win in very good fashion indeed.
And all the doubts you had about the campaign from time to time as it went along and the changes in the Labour Party, has that all been worthwhile, or do you think actually you could have done this without making all the changes you have?
No, this is a remarkable testament, I think, to the courage and vision of Tony Blair, and I think that will come out more and more. But I was very satisfied with the campaign. I think they worked excellently in all parts. Millbank, Walworth Road, in our regions, the members of Parliament themselves. It was a tremendous organisational effort. We had the message right, we had the organisation right, and we had the best leader, and that's the themes we use constantly through the elections, and that's coming out.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Prescott. I hope we hear from you again later on when things have become more clear.
Certainly will.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if the sound was a bit bad on that from John Prescott, but we'll improve things, no doubt, as we go along. Now, I said we were going to be in all sorts of places. Let's just have a look at some of the places we're at. Right across the country, we're in the southwest, for instance, Camborne and Falmouth, and Banff and Buchan, up in the far north of Scotland, where the SNP leader is fighting his seat. We're in Wales, in Ynys Môn, in Folkestone, Michael Howard's seat, in Galloway and Stirling, where 2 Tory ministers may well be at risk. And at some of the more extraordinary fights, there have been some particular battlefields within the great battlefield that has been fought throughout the United Kingdom. We're in Tatton, where Neil Hamilton and Martin Bell have been slugging it out, and in Putney, where Sir James Goldsmith's billionaire intervention may have upset things, David Mellor defending the seat there. And we're going to be in hundreds and hundreds of places. Well, perhaps that's a slight exaggeration, but at least over 100 places throughout the United Kingdom. There they all are, waiting for us now, and we'll be going to them through the night with reporters, going to the counts and hearing the story as it comes through. Well, now let's go back for a moment to where we began, with John Simpson, with Sedgefield and Tony Blair. John, do you know now what exactly the plan is?
Well, exactly. It's probably a bit of an exaggeration, I should think, even at this stage. It looks as though Tony Blair will be here in maybe a couple of hours' time, maybe less than that, but perhaps 10:45, something like that. And the actual result won't come in for some time. That is actually the house, Mirabella House in Trimdon Village, where Tony Blair is at the moment. I imagine he's probably watching this programme. And it's a rather attractive little place, as indeed is Trimdon Labour Club, which you're looking at the moment. And Trimdon Labour Club is a place which a moment or two ago was extremely excited. Now they look as though they're settling in for a good evening's entertainment, perhaps, knowing the result or guessing that the result is going to be the kind of one that they want.
And John, what is Tony Blair's actual plan tonight? What are his movements? I mean, if he is going to become the next Prime Minister, where will we first see him? Where will he be going? Is he going to London tonight? What's his plan?
Yes, what he'll do, he'll come here first of all, obviously, for his own result. I imagine he'll talk to us once or twice. And then after the result, he'll fly down to London, and he'll be going, in fact, to the centre of London to a party and no doubt a big celebration.
This is the party at the Festival Hall that they may be holding, or we've been told they'll be holding.
Indeed.
OK, John, thanks so much. Kate Adie with the Prime Minister at Huntingdon. Now, what's the plan there?
Well, as far as we know, we'll first catch sight of the Prime Minister, as he still is, around about 3:30 this morning. At the moment, he's at home in his house in Great Stookley. Quiet little village, just a few miles up the road from here in St Ives. And there's not much idea of what is going on. He's with his family and some of his campaign supporters, and he'll probably remain in the house, and I don't think we'll get a sight of him until he turns up at the count here at St Ives. As I said, that's about 5 hours' time.
Have they given any indication, if it is the sort of landslide defeat that we're talking about, whether he'll concede at that stage or whether he's going to wait until much later on?
I think it's thought to be unlikely. I think whatever is going to happen, and from his character and from the way that things are conducted, it will be a dignified facing up to whatever has happened. And that's unlikely to involve just the constituency here. He's probably going to go straight back to London, whatever the result, and whatever has to be said will be said on a national basis. So I think that that's where we'll hear any major decision that will take place in the early hours of this morning.
OK, Kate, thanks very much. Jane Corbyn is spending the night down in Yeovil at Paddy Ashdown's headquarters. Jane, it looks as though, according to our exit poll, it could be quite a good result. Is that Mr Ashdown behind you?
As we speak, we're expecting Paddy Ashdown to come out at any moment. He's here at Vane Cottage in Yeovil. And no responses yet. He's had a quiet dinner with some friends and is obviously biding his time at the moment. But obviously some indication that his vote has held up. And as I say, we're expecting him to come out. We hope to see him here in a minute. His boxes have started to arrive at his count, we understand, down at the social club, the Western Social Club in Yeovil. Look, they're beginning work already down there, and a busy night in store for them. Because it could be, later we'll obviously be going on down to the Liberal Club here.
It could be quite a good night for the Liberals, couldn't it? I mean, if they've got the same voters last time round and they've done better in the West Country and maybe benefited from people trying to get the Tories out in places, Mr Ashdown could be in with double the number of seats or so that he had last time.
Yes, obviously their strategy has been to target their best hoped seats, around 15, particularly in the southwest, and they must be hoping that that strategy has been successful. There is some indication that it has, and indeed that their vote is held up nationally. OK,
Jane, thanks very much. We'll be back with you. Let's join Jeremy Paxman. Jeremy.
Michael Portillo, are you going to miss the ministerial limo?
As Brian Mulwiney said, I think we'll wait for the real results.
But on the basis of these exit polls, you aren't in with a prayer. You're going down to the worst defeat in 150 years.
I still think it's reasonable that we should wait for the real results rather than speculate upon the theory. We're going to have a theory and we're going to have a fact tonight. So why don't we wait for the fact?
What do you think was the biggest mistake in the campaign?
I thought the biggest mistake was Tony Blair telling fibs about pensions.
What was your own biggest mistake in the party?
I think the thing that the party needs to reflect upon is that it has done itself no good by showing its divisions. That's what I think we need to reflect upon.
Do you think that on the basis of this likely outcome, John Major can continue as leader?
Well, we don't have an outcome yet, and when we do, John Major can consider that, and he won't need any advice from me. He'll consider it for himself.
But when you talk about divisions in the party being damaging, these divisions were actually caused by people who shared your views about Europe.
Well, I think it takes many to make a division, but the important thing is that parties do better when they're not divided, and that is obviously something that the party needs to reflect upon.
We counted 254 personal manifestos issued by candidates of your party which took a different line to the official party line.
Yes. I think then there is a happy medium between the discipline that is required to keep a party looking credible and attractive to the electorate and the Maoist imposition of control of thought and deed.
I must interrupt you there, David.
We go down to Yeovil because Paddy Ashdown's talking there.
It's up to us then to put whatever the verdict is into operation in the next Parliament and to bring the voters' wishes into the business of government.
You say you fought a good campaign. What about, the BBC has you on 18%.
I never believe opinion polls, whether they're good or whether they're bad, but 18% would be an extremely good result. Nick?
Has there been any indication yet of how it's gone?
As far as we can tell, and it's very difficult to tell at this moment, the turnout's been high, and that's a very good thing for democracy. In the Yeovil constituency, I understand perhaps as much as 80%. Apart from that, I would caution against predicting the results until we know it. But what I'm confident of is that the Liberal Democrats have got their messages across, have fought a very good campaign, and I think we're going to see a strengthened position for the Liberal Democrats. Our job now is to ensure that the verdict of the nation, the verdict of the voters, is put into operation in the next government in a responsible and cooperative way.
Do you think your strategy of targeting certain seats has been successful?
Sorry, Nick, I'll come to you in a moment.
Would you be happy with the same number of seats as you've got at the moment, 25?
I don't predict the outcome of the election, and I would caution against it. The opinion polls have been proved wrong in the past. We've only got a few hours to wait. I'm quite happy to wait until the result, and I think it's important that we let the voters decide this rather than the press.
Do you think it looks as if your strategy of targeting your best hoped seats has worked?
All parties target. What we've done is put forward a very, very clear message to the electorate, and they've responded to it. If indeed the opinion polls are right, then we will have doubled our vote in the course of this campaign. That's a tremendous mandate for the things that we've been standing for: more investment in education, more investment in the health service, and we'll try and carry that through into the next government. I think that's really sufficient, folks. Thanks very much indeed. All the best.
Cheers.
Lukey.
Michael Portillo, before we went away to Paddy Ashdown there, you were saying the big mistake in your party had been that you had appeared divided. If John Major is incapable of uniting the party, who would be?
Well, what I said before was that a party needs to be united, and that's what the party needs to reflect upon. We don't know the result of the election yet, but whatever the result is, I'm sure the Conservatives could have done better than they will have done if over the last few years they had been more united. And therefore what I'm saying is the important thing is for the party to find the way of being united in the future.
But didn't the divisions in your party start when John Redwood challenged for the leadership?
No, I think they go back a good deal further than that.
So you're riven from top to toe and have been for many years?
No, we had one single disagreement on the single currency, and that matter, I think, made it more difficult for us to be a credible party presenting ourselves to the public. Whatever the result may have been tonight, I'm sure we could have done better if that had not been so.
If you have gone down to this sort of defeat, can John Major stay as leader?
We haven't got a result yet. John Major will consider the result when we have one.
But on the basis of this prediction, it is likely that you will be one of the few cabinet ministers who keeps his seat. You, Michael Heseltine, John Major, but all those people like Michael Howard, Malcolm Rifkind, Michael Forsyth, they will all have gone.
Well, I'm not going to make any assumptions about the result, and I'm not quite sure why you're so impatient to do so.
Michael Portillo, thank you. David?
Thanks, Jeremy. Well, I wonder why we're impatient. We're not going to be impatient for too long, because the count is going on helter-skelter everywhere, all over the United Kingdom at the moment. But there is a slight drawback this year, that the councils in England, county councils, and some of the unitary authorities are also balloting today, and therefore when the ballot boxes arrive, the voting papers have to be sorted out between the parliamentary constituency and the council constituencies. It's going to mean that we hear rather more from Scotland, for instance, which is of course an interesting battle with the SNP there, and in Wales, before we hear so much from England, and Northern Ireland of course mainly comes in tomorrow. So, but anyway, if 57 minutes is right, we should get something by the hour, by 11 o'clock with a bit of luck. But anyway, let's now have a look at what really matters tonight, which is the battleground, where this battle is being fought out. Peter.
Yes, David, well, these are the seats that will decide it. Now, they're all blue here because the Tories won them in the last Parliament, but the opposition are on the attack here. What we've done is we've ranked these defensive Tory blocks of blue depending on the majority they had in the last Parliament. Eastwood in Glasgow, for example, a big 7,000 majority there for the Tories, so a shocking great big blue block. Here is Ian Lang in Galloway, for example, a rather smaller blue block. Down here, a very tiny tile of blue indeed, in Brecon and Radnorshire. The Liberal Democrats are chasing that seat. Now, let me point you to one, Tynemouth. Here's a typical middle-sized blue block. Swing required 5% for Mr. Blair to take Tynemouth. If he takes that, but not many more blocks above that, he's in with a tight majority. If he takes a seat like Scarborough and Whitby, wow, he's going to get a huge landslide. So what we can do now is we can just line up all these blocks like a great staircase, starting with the lower ones over there, right down the corner. There's the low ones, and the staircase gets higher and higher and higher and higher. The mountains of Tory strongholds are up on the right here. Let's bring them up so you can read them quite clearly. And we've ranked them then by order of vulnerability. to the opposition from the Tories. The most vulnerable of all, the Vale of Glamorgan, 19 votes only separated Walter Sweeney from his Labour challenger in 1992. Stirling, Michael Forsyth's seat, the Scottish Secretary, only a couple of hundred votes separating him. He's about the 7th most vulnerable Conservative in the country. Up the first column, up the second column, until you get to Galloway, number 46. That is Ian Lang's seat, the President of the Board of Trade. He's vulnerable to the Scottish National Party. Up the second column, up the third column here, until you get to Edinburgh Pentland's 74, the 74th most vulnerable Conservative seat of the opposition. That is Malcolm Rifkin's seat, the Foreign Secretary. Here now, number 57, just before Edinburgh Pentland's, is the target for Mr. Blair. He has to fill that first column and the whole of the second column with red Labour gains. If he gets through that goalpost, 57 net gains, he's got an overall majority, a very basic one of just 1. If he gets up the third column, up the fourth column, capturing seats like Bristol West, William Walgrave's seat up here, then he's in with a landslide. And let's just see what our opinion polls suggest might happen. And I stress might happen. Even John Prescott was saying it might not happen. This is an exit poll. Let's see what happens. Start down the bottom corner. And there, I'm going up the first column, the second column are the Labour gains forecast by our exit poll if they happen this way. Right up here, good heavens, into the 6th, 7th, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th column. We've even got parachutists here getting into incredibly safe Conservative territory over here. So if anything like this happens, it's a huge landslide. And notice one other very important thing, that the Liberal Democrats look as if they're going to be picking off 1 or 2 of their target seats as well, and the Scottish National Party as well, David.
Thanks very much. Well, now, the news from Sunderland South is that they expect to get their result through at 10 to 11. That would beat all records, and that's only half an hour away, and that first result will give us the first indication of whether our exit poll is correct. But what Peter had on the screen there would mean that large numbers of people disappeared from sight for a period, cabinet ministers. Sally Magnuson, for instance, is in Stirling, where Michael Forsyth might well be in trouble. Sally, what's your impression?
The feeling tonight is, as it's been right throughout the campaign, that it's going to be very, very close. There seems to have been a fairly high turnout in the rural areas, which is good for Michael Forsyth because that's where the Conservatives had hoped to harvest many of their votes. But the Conservatives themselves say that although they have managed to get their vote out, the size of what appears to be the national swing against them may just prove too much, even for such an amazing political Houdini as Michael Forsyth. I think at the end of the day, the SNP vote may be the key. They got about 14% of the vote last time. If their sympathisers have decided to vote tactically with Labour in order to get Michael Forsyth out, then the chances are they probably have succeeded.
OK, thanks very much, Sally. Let's go to John Nicholson at Galloway. Ian Lang, who was Secretary of State for Scotland, now Secretary of Trade. Do you think he's in trouble?
Well, he's certainly in trouble, David. I mean, all the signs are here tonight in Galloway that he's fighting for his political life. And here it's the SNP who are the major challengers. They held the seat between 74 and 79. Last time round, many thought that they'd take the seat, but Mr. Lang held on with a 2,400 majority or thereabouts. It's a high turnout here in Galloway. They think it's 70 to 80% today. But the signs have to be that the Nationalists are in a very strong position to take it. The Nationalists themselves believe that they've taken it, although they say they think they've taken it probably by a smaller majority than they were expecting.
OK, thanks very much. What about the Foreign Secretary, Malcolm Rifkind, in Edinburgh Pentlands? Gavin Hewitt is there. Gavin.
Well, I think there is the prospect that the Foreign Secretary will end his career in politics after 23 years. At the weekend, the polls were putting him 8 percentage points behind. He believes his support has strengthened in the last few days, and indeed his agent said to us a few minutes ago that he was quietly confident. So I think we have a Foreign Secretary who's very anxious and just a little bit hopeful.
OK, thanks very much, Gavin. And now Sarah Nelson is at Bristol West. This will be a surprise one. William Walgrave's seat. Do you think he's in trouble too?
Well, the Liberal Democrats and Labour certainly hope so. What's interesting here is that he doesn't have an overall majority, which does give the opposition plenty to play for. And the Liberal Democrats are in second place. They need an 8% swing to take it. Labour are looking for an 11% swing to take it. And I think William Walgrave's best hope is that the other two actually cancel each other out. His vote may collapse, but unless the other two can beat one or the other, then he's safe.
Have you got any indication of how it's gone?
Liberal Democrats say that their vote, they believe, has firmed up in the last couple of days, and they're looking very hopeful, but we've seen an awful lot of Labour supporters here too. The city is actually Labour controlled at the moment on the local level, so they're looking to this as really a feather in the cap to top off what they believe will be a good night in Bristol for Labour.
Sarah, thanks very much indeed. Let's have a look at how many members of Cabinet are threatened. Which ones in particular, Peter?
Right, indeed, and not just members of Cabinet, David. Top personalities standing under the cliff. Now, this cliff could fall on them really quite hard if the landslide suggested for Labour is anything like the proportions that it might be, even at the bottom end of our exit poll. Let's just have a look at some of these top personnel. We can call them dicey dozen, by the way. We're not suggesting a moment that their conduct has been dicey. It's their vulnerability we're concerned, the dicey position they're in. Look at Michael Forsyth, dicily placed just right under the shadow of this cliff. Only 200 his majority last time. Here's Edwina Currie, something like 1,200. She seems to have given up the game already. She's only got a 1,200 majority in Derbyshire South. Jerry Hayes and Harlow, also very vulnerable. Giles Brandreth and Chester. We've talked about Ian Lang over here. Sebastian Coe in Falmouth and Camborne. Under challenge from the Liberal Democrats and from the Labour Party. There's Tony Marlow, the arch Eurosceptic in Northampton North. Malcolm Rifkin, we heard about in Edinburgh Pentlands, 4,000 majority. 5% swing would do for him. Here is Nick Budgeon in Wolverhampton South West. He would go down to something like a 6% swing. David Miller. Now we're getting towards the end of the risk now. On the other hand, if we have a 13% swing, as our poll was suggesting, David Miller would go down in Putney, William Walgrave would go down in Bristol West. Michael Howard, the Home Secretary, is really under challenge from the Liberal Democrats. And we put him on the end here just to illustrate the extent of the possible damage that could be done to the Conservatives. But if there were a 9% swing to the Liberal Democrats from the Conservatives, which does look unlikely, then Michael Howard himself could be at risk. So you can see just how many top figures in the Tory party are endangered by what's happening tonight. David.
Well, let's just have a look as a reminder at what our exit poll is saying. Remember, we haven't had any real results yet. We won't get one, we think, until 10 to 11. But this is what our exit poll is saying. A landslide is likely, bringing Tony Blair to number 10. And this is the share of the vote. Labour on 47%. The Conservatives on 29%. 18% for the Liberal Democrats like last time round, 6% for the others. That 29%, the worst result for the Conservatives since 1832. And that the result of talking to 14,000 or so people in 200 polling stations. So that is simply an exit poll based on what people have told us they did. And until we get the first result, to tell the absolute truth, we know nothing for certain. Let's go and join Fiona Bruce, who's at Trimdon, Sedgefield, which is Tony Blair's constituency. Fiona, have you begun to get a feeling there of whether they think that they've got the landslide that we've been talking about?
Tell you, when the results of the exit poll went up here, there was a huge cheer. People were standing, clapping, cheering. It was quite amazing. I think until that exit poll, obviously people here were pretty hopeful, but they felt a little bit superstitious. But I think now, with the result in, they're feeling very, very confident. I'm joined here by John Burton, Tony Blair's agent. How's Tony Blair feeling now?
Well, I've been in touch with the office, Fiona, and he's very pleased, really.
We can hear they're pretty pleased behind.
It's exciting times. It's exciting times. Well, the exit poll, it won't be uniform across the country, and there'll be variations. But it looks like a nice majority for Labour.
Is he feeling pretty confident?
Well, I don't know whether we still dare say that, are we? But I'm sure that he feels that he'll form the next government.
It must be a very different feeling now the polls come out. He must be beginning to relax a little bit.
I don't know whether you do relax in a situation like this. He's been very relaxed through the, I think, through the last few days of the campaign, and I think that's made a difference to the voters, actually. And so he looked the same. He was the same cheery self. With Tony, what you see, you get. So when I met him earlier on tonight, the smile was still there, and he was quietly confident then, I think.
Well, we'll see what he's got to say. Tony Blair's coming down here to make a speech about 1:30, so we'll see what he's got to say. That's the scene here in Sedgefield.
Thanks, Fiona. John Burton is the man who actually got Tony Blair that constituency at Sedgefield way back in '83 when Labour lost, and he came in at the very last minute and got on to the list of candidates and managed to scrape in, and that's where his political career began. So John Burton is somebody who Tony Blair talks to all the time, has been talking through this campaign while he's been running it up there, and Mr. Blair has been rushing around the country. Well, now let's go to the party headquarters. We're joined by Jeremy Vine, John Sopel and Carolyn Quinn. Jeremy Vine, first of all, at Labour Party headquarters at Millbank. What's the reaction been?
Well, just a few Labour figures have been drifting around and watching actually the screen just next to me here where the BBC's programme is on, and are just astonished by what we are predicting may happen later on tonight. One said, last time I was on the winning side was when we won the election in 1974. And I think they're beginning, David, to unpick the campaign and wonder exactly where it went so very right for them. And particularly looking at what the Conservatives did. They feel the Conservatives' campaign never really got it together. They never really got onto the economy, which they felt would be the Conservatives' best subject. They went on to Europe, which was a bad subject for them. On, for example, the Conservatives' attack on Labour's policy on privatisation, which was one moment in the campaign when the skids did momentarily go under Labour. They said they had 2 good days campaigning against us as in Labour, and then John Major went to the Grand National and stopped talking about it. So they feel the Conservatives' campaign was almost a complete shambles, and theirs ran almost to plan. So this is the headquarters, of course, where the whole thing was formulated. 2 floors above me in what's called the War Room, there was a thing called a spin table, where all these spin doctors would gather around and talk about what clearly has been a very successful campaign.
Thanks, Jeremy. And John Sopel, who was with John Major right through the campaign. What's the reaction? They keeping as tight-lipped as Dr. Mawhinney was?
Well, I think they're dishevelled, distressed and somewhat shell-shocked by what they've heard. I spoke to one of the senior figures in the party who asked what the exit poll figures were, and you could see the colour drain from his face. I think they can't quite believe it. Every day we've been out on the road with John Major, people, John Major from him downwards have been coming up to us and saying, listen, the polls are wrong. It's much closer than that. The response we're getting on the doorstep is absolutely fantastic, better than 1992. You're left with 2 possible options. One is that the people have been lying to the canvassers, or the canvassers have been lying to the politicians about what is really happening in the country. Because clearly it is a disaster that is facing the Conservative Party tonight if, and it's a big if, the exit poll is correct.
Thanks very much. And Carolyn Quinn, you've been with Paddy Ashdown right through. What's the reaction at Liberal Democrat headquarters?
Well, David, if there was a collective noun for excited Liberal Democrats, I think it would have to be applied here tonight. We've got a group of supporters and party workers here at Pizza on the Park in London. And just as in Sedgefield, as Fiona Bruce was saying, there was a huge cheer here when the results of the exit polls were announced. That 18% for the Liberal Democrats, they read as translating into a possible 40 seats for them. That's taking into account the drop in the Tory percentage. So they're terribly buoyed up here, I have to say. They were very excited anyway before they came in here. And there's been a very upbeat mood in these past few days. Paddy Ashdown himself saying that he's much happier with the party's performance now than at the same stage in the 92 election campaign. So I think a lot of enthusiasm here, a lot of excitement, and anticipating possibly 40 seats, although obviously no one can tell. Just one thing to say, 15 of the Liberal Democrat target seats won't declare until about 3:30, so it could seem a bit slow to get going here, first of all.
Carolyn, thanks very much. And if you could start a little competition for what the right collective noun is for excited Liberal Democrats, perhaps they'd like to think of one themselves and let us know later on.
I'll talk to them now and see if they can come up with something. Maybe let them have a few more drinks first.
OK, thanks very much, Carolyn. Well, now let's join our roving reporter, Frank Skinner. Where have you got to?
David, I'm in Harrogate and Knaresborough, and I'm with 2 blokes who really care who wins the election tonight. Hello.
Good evening.
Terry, it's not looking good for you with the exit polls, is it? Do you have other work?
Oh, I have other work. I'm in the holiday business. I promote Florida homes and apartments.
Are you keeping away from Europe?
Absolutely, yes.
So business is booming?
Business is booming, yes.
Well,
so
this time next year, John Major could be working as a lookalike of you.
Absolutely.
That's
yes,
quite possible. Now, Dean, if Labour do win, which it looks like they might, what will that do to your life?
Wow, it's going to become very hectic.
Have you got any work sort of lined up?
Well, hopefully there'll be a fair on Sunday at Cardiff, at least.
Eat your heart out, Terry. You missed out on that
yes,
one, mate.
Right.
Now, do you vote Labour, Dean? Do I ask?
I do, yes.
And do you vote Conservative, Terry?
Of course, and always have done.
It's a coincidence, isn't it? I wonder if Peter Stringfellow voted for Margaret Thatcher. When did you first realise you looked like?
I suppose it goes back to
you just wondered why people threw eggs at you all the time.
I've never had that kind of problem.
Oh, good.
Never. But it was 6 years ago when he first became Chancellor, and then following his appointment as PM, the rest is history, as they say.
Yes.
We've had 6 tremendous years.
Well,
fun.
I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and you did your best. God bless you. So, you also, Dean, are a bit of a gold medal winning dancer.
I am, yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So this could be the one chance we get for the Dancing with the Enemy finish. So would you like to, as I sing Rock Around the Clock, let's go for it.
Right.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to... David, I wouldn't like you to think that I'm trivialising this election in any way. You know that, don't you?
You can trivialise it until we start getting results in, and then you'll have to play it straight, Frank.
Oh, well, they can dance all night, I think. I'll just do hits from the 50s.
Where are you off to next?
I'm staying around here for a bit and talking to a few local characters, of which there are many. And then I think I'm going to a ballroom dancing thing, and then to a maternity hospital.
Well,
you know, a usual sort of a Thursday night out.
We'll see you again. The first child born under a Labour government, I suppose, for 18 years. Well, let's just go around and see what's happening out in the country. A number of prominent people have been arriving at their counts. Claire Short, for instance, there in Birmingham. And that's with her son, newly discovered son, who she'd had adopted many years back. Toby, who was a Tory and then said he would vote Labour, and he's wearing a red Labour rosette. And Barbara Follett, with Ken Follett, the writer, in Stevenage. And she was a key figure in the early days of the revamp of Labour. Used to Folletize, as it was called. That all was some time ago now. Oh, my goodness me. Did they know we were watching? And Hartlepool, Peter Mandelson, who apparently narrowly escaped a terrible car accident yesterday, but he's the man who really constructed the whole of this campaign. He was responsible for every twist and turn of manipulation. He's known as the Prince of Darkness by his enemies. And there he is looking at the pager with messages coming through, probably saying, "You're on BBC One, smile." And they control these things so closely. And Ken Livingstone in Brent. Oh, yes, there he is. You can see the rosette, the yellow and red rosette. You can't see his face, unfortunately. There he is. A man who was on the left of the Labour Party, but was actually right through this campaign very loyal to the new Labour and its campaign. He's got a safe Labour seat there. So, there we are. We're still waiting for the first result to come in. It's 3 minutes if Sunderland are to keep to their word. I haven't heard any news yet about whether they're going to be any later than that. But in 3 minutes' time, we should have the first result. Now, Tony King, if our exit poll is correct, this is a sensational night we face.
Oh, absolutely. Landslide is much too weak a word. This is
well,
an
what stronger word than landslide do you have?
I offer you the following metaphor. It's an asteroid hitting the planet and destroying practically all life on Earth. It is an extraordinary result. There's been nothing like it, if this is what's going to happen, since the Second World War. There's really been nothing like it in this century. Most notably, the total collapse, it would appear, of the Conservative vote. Labour is doing very well, but the Conservatives are doing horrendously badly. As you said a few minutes ago, it looks like being their worst night possibly since the Great Reform Act of 1832.
I should say we're still talking exit poll talk. We haven't had any real results in. You have to stay with this programme until we get real results in, and then we can say whether our exit poll is telling the truth. Let's go around some of the interesting contests that have been going on. Vivian White and Rihanna Scipio, Gordon Brewer and Michael Burke. Vivian White, first of all, is in Tatton. Vivian, good evening. What's been going on in Tatton?
Well, while you've been having your general election campaign, effectively we've been inhabiting an entirely different, a parallel political universe here. What in fact has been going on here amounts to a by-election on the single issue of the trustworthiness and the reputation of Neil Hamilton, the Conservative candidate. And that's been the issue chosen by Martin Bell, who of course has come here to fight that election. And it would have been extraordinary in any constituency, these events taking place, but here it's almost incredible. To give you a picture of this constituency, it's not just safe and settled and secure. This is a place where the Conservative Association headquarters in Knutsford is quite unashamedly right opposite the Rolls-Royce showroom. This isn't just a safe Conservative seat, it's an absurdly safe Conservative seat in ordinary circumstances, and made more so by the decanting of votes from the neighbouring constituency of Macclesfield by the Boundary Commission. And that means that there would be a mountain of 13,000 Tory votes to shift for them to win. But that's what Martin Bell's campaign are still claiming at present.
OK, Vivian, thanks very much. Rihanna Scipio is in Exeter, where there's been a particularly bitter battle going on, hasn't there?
Well, the count is well underway here in Exeter. Of course, it's a key West Country seat for Labour. Early indications are that the turnout here has been very good. Estimations at 12 o'clock today that they're 10% up on the 92 elections, which could be good for Labour's man, Ben Bradshaw, who is the first candidate to have disclosed the issue of his homosexuality before a poll. And he might need all the help he can get tonight, David, especially as his main opponent here is Dr. Adrian Rogers, who's campaigned strongly on family values and is staunchly anti-gay.
Thanks very much. And Gordon Brewer's in Reigate. Gordon.
Well, the interesting thing here, David, is that Sir George Gardner, who, if you remember, was deselected as the Tory candidate, is standing for the referendum party. Now, his people here are claiming to be doing very well. They're not claiming they're going to win the seat, and that could open up a very interesting situation, because rather in line with your exit poll, the talk here is that Labour could do quite well, and that the most Tory seat one can imagine. In fact, the Tory candidate got into trouble at the beginning of the campaign for saying the Tories could put up a donkey here and it would still win. It might not be as easy as that. There's just the outside possibility this could turn into a three-way marginal. That's the situation here in Reigate.
And Michael Burke's in Putney. Michael.
Well, the papers were calling this the most hotly contested seat in Britain. Most of the attention, of course, on David Mellor, who's defending a majority of 7,500. A swing of nearly 8% would unseat him, and if the exit poll is anything like right, it would leave him a lot of time to spend on his outside interests. Certainly his officials here are looking rather worried. But the wild card is Sir James Goldsmith, who's reportedly spent £20 million on the referendum party, but has chosen here to stand himself. No idea yet of how many votes he's going to get, or whether it'll split the Tory vote or the anti-Tory vote. Two other points that are quite interesting. All three of the leading candidates are millionaires. Sir James Goldsmith, obviously. David Mellor, because of his football punditry, newspaper columnist, and those outside interests of his. But also the Labour candidate actually was one of the co-founders of Topshop and a director of the Burton Group. All three millionaires. And the other interesting point is that very little has been made about the more colourful episodes in David Mellor's past. Both the Labour candidate and Sir James Goldsmith are on their third marriage. Glass houses, not picking up any stones.
And did you hear the curious story that Goldsmith went campaigning and every door they knocked on, the person who came to the door was naked?
Apparently so. It was weekend in Putney. And that's how they do it here, apparently.
It's not how it was when I lived there. Peter.
Well, now, just to make sure that you're ready for it, when the Sunderland South, if that is the first result, swing comes in, we will be able to see just what that would mean, although Sunderland South, of course, is a very safe Labour seat, not a typical one that Labour have to win. Here are the blue Conservative MPs that will go down to a swing to Labour, and here are the red Labour MPs that will go down to a swing to the Tories. What happens is, as the pendulum moves along there, you can see that the red MPs all come up there. Something like 100 would go down for a 10% swing to Labour, and if there were, of course, a swing to the Conservatives, then these red Labour MPs would turn blue for Conservatives, and Mr Major would be back with a shocking great landslide majority. Now, for each point of swing, there is, of course, a different outcome in the House of Commons. And so we can turn our swing on up this way and show you that for no change at all, there'd be a Conservative majority, we estimate, of 27 on the new boundaries. Now, just inside the point of swing here that reaches 0.8 to Labour, 14 of these seats would go red. Mr Major would lose his majority. And, for example, Michael Forsyth up there in Stirling will be one of the most immediate casualties, with his very slender majority indeed in that seat. Now, let's go on to the 4.5% that Labour need for a majority of just one. 55 of these seats turning red. There's, for example, Malcolm Rifkin, a 4.5% swing in Edinburgh Pentlands would be the end of him. 4,000 majority there. Maybe things will go differently in Scotland, maybe he won't lose his seat. But the kind of swing our exit poll is suggesting, the centre point of it, the centre of the band of swing is about 13%, could be up to 15, could be as low as 11. That, if it was reflected, particularly in these seats here, which of course are the ones that Labour has to win, the marginal seats, it could be a Labour majority of a couple of hundred. And one other vulnerable cabinet minister in the way of that swing is 13,000 majority that Tony Newton has in Braintree. David.
Thanks, Peter. Well, we're just waiting now for Sunderland South Chris Mullin, thumb up in the air. No doubt he knows perfectly well that he's won. He's got a very safe seat with a 14,000 majority. Now, Tony King, while we're watching these pictures, what kind of swing should we be looking out for in this safe Labour seat if it's to confirm the kind of landslide we've been talking about?
Well, we'll listen to the returning officer, and if Chris Mullin is reported as having got round about 34,000 votes, then that means that Labour is in for a huge win tonight and that our exit poll is broadly right. We listen to the returning officer, wait for the Chris Mullin figure. He's the sitting Labour Member of Parliament. His vote last time was under 30,000. It may go up to a very much higher figure, and if it does, then it does look as though Labour is going to make it.
And those ballot boxes there's Chris Mullin waiting for his result to come through. He's been the MP here since 1987. Now, do you think that it's a fair indication for the country as a whole as a safe seat for Labour? Because there is a feeling that in safe Labour seats people may not swing quite so much back to Labour from the other parties. The vote, after all, for the Conservatives was only 30% last time and Liberal Democrats on 10% or so. I mean, how could it be that there would be a switch to Labour?
Well, the finding from our exit poll does indeed suggest that the Labour Party is going to do better in Tory-held seats than in Labour seats. But against that, the exit poll is suggesting a high turnout in Labour seats.
The returning officer coming to the podium for this, the first result of this 1997 general election, a safe Labour seat, but what we're watching for is the switching in the vote, which will give us the first clue of whether Labour has done as well as all the predictions and the exit polls
suggest. The total number of votes
suggest.
given for each candidate at the election was as follows: John Anthony Lennox, Liberal Democrat, 4,606. Christopher John Mullin, the Labour Party candidate, 27,174. Timothy John Schofield, Conservative Party candidate, 7,536. Margaret Ann McQuillan Wilkinson, UK Independence Party, 609. And that Christopher John Mullin has been duly elected to serve as the member for the Sunderland South constituency.
Well, there's the result. Labour 27,000. We were talking about 34,000, but I think the turnout must be down. Conservatives on 7,500, the Liberal Democrats on 4,600. He holds it with a majority of 19,600. And this is the swing, the key figure we're waiting for, an 11% swing from Conservative to Labour, and that broadly confirms what our exit poll was telling us. We're in line for a Labour landslide. This is the first MP elected tonight.
18 years of Conservative rule are going to come to an end. And I am proud that the people of Sunderland, who during those 18 years have suffered more than most, are leading the way. Tonight marks the beginning of a new era, a return to one-nation politics. From now on, Britain will be governed in the interests of all its citizens and not just in the interests of the fortunate. I thank the people of Sunderland for re-electing me. I thank the Sunderland South Labour Party for allowing me again to be their candidate. I thank my good friend Kevin Marquis, who's been my agent.
Well, let's have a look at that result, Peter, and what it does to the swing and the exit poll that we've been using so far. This is the first result of the night.
Indeed, the first real piece of proper result to grind our teeth into and see how it works on our swingometer. There are the blue Conservative MPs that'll go down to the swing. That's the way it's got to go. 4.5% swing to Labour would be enough for an overall majority. We're going past 4.5. It's going up past 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in a safe Labour seat. a 10.5% swing in Sunderland South. We think the swing will be greater in the seats the Conservatives are defending, and those are these very seats up here, these marginal seats. A swing like that would see Labour in with a majority of 100. If it's higher in the Tory-held seats, it'll be even worse. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, let's go to one of the other seats that will be in trouble. Let's just have a look at the forecast. Wait a moment. On the basis of this, we've had one result in, and we confirm our forecast. Landslide likely. Sunderland South tells us that we're on track for a Labour landslide on a gargantuan scale. It means a lot of people in the Tory party are going to be looking anxiously at their results. Edwina Currie said it would be a miracle if she held on to Derbyshire South, and Martin Bashir is with her there. Martin. Well, we're rather hoping Martin Bashir's there. Edwina Currie's there, but Martin Bashir's not there. I don't know whether, well, we'll come back in a moment. Jeremy.
Neil Kinnock, you'd have died for forecasts like this and results like that, wouldn't you?
It would have been very nice, especially as I recall Sunderland came in first last time, and indelibly on my memory is a swing of 2.4% last time. The swing in Chris's seat on this occasion of 11% is sensational, and if the swing is more modest in safe Labour seats than it is in the seats that Labour needs to take, then we really are in for a spectacular evening, and I'll begin to believe the exit polls, even though my calculation would be slightly more modest than they show.
What would it be?
I think a 10% swing rather than the 13% shown in
just the 10% swing.
Yeah,
Okay.
just the 10%. Yeah,
all right.
10% for number 10, that'll do nicely.
Michael Portillo, are you ready to drink hemlock yet?
Certainly not. One result doesn't make the general election result. In any case, I will just comment on each result as they come in. It's not for me to make any statement about the overall position.
Michael Heseltine says you need to analyse where you went wrong.
Well, of course, if it doesn't work out well for us tonight, we would have to do that. What I hope we would do is do it in a considered, measured way over a period of time, emphasising the need for unity within the party and not jumping to conclusions.
When you use the word if, we have of course to remember that you were the man who said the poll tax was an election winner, and you're not seriously denying the likely outcome at present.
Well, I've just said to you that it would not be for me to make a declaration about the overall outcome. That obviously doesn't fall to me, but I'm happy to comment on each result as it comes in. The first one has shown a big Labour swing.
David Steele, it's more difficult to predict how things are going to turn out for the Liberal Democrats for all sorts of complicated reasons, but from what you hear, how are things looking?
Well, I think they're looking very well. I mean, we started this campaign at around 10%. We've got 18%. That means tremendous credit to Paddy Ashdown and the whole election team. It's been a superb, positive campaign, very professional. But I remind you, we got 18% last time. We only got 20 seats. And in 1983, when Roy Jenkins and I were fighting on the Alliance, we got 26%, and we only got 23 seats. So I'm not counting any chickens until they're hatched.
But in terms of the influence you could actually exercise, a Labour landslide is about the worst possible outcome for you, isn't it? Because they don't need you.
They don't need us, that's true, but if this exit poll is right, and there's a big Labour majority, but a parliamentary party of 30 to 40, if that's what some people are forecasting now, is a tremendous difference from simply a dozen or the 15, 18 that I had when I was leader.
Thank you all very much. David?
Thanks, Jeremy. Let's find out from Scotland what's going on there. There's, of course, a different race in Scotland because the Scottish National Party are fighting hard there, and the Tories look as though they're going to be back like they were in Gladstone's Midlothian campaign on these figures. But Jane Frankie is there. Jane?
Oh, thank you, David. Yes, up here in Scotland, as well as the 3 cabinet ministers you've talked about already, there are other fascinating battles going on. How well, for example, can the Scottish National Party do? They're aiming high. Up in Banff, SNP leader Alex Salmond is confident, and not only of his own seat. He's put on a charity bet with a bookmaker that the Nationalists will win 7 or more seats. Now, their main battle is to try and break through the rock-solid Labour support in the central belt. And they've particularly targeted Glasgow Govan, hoping to capitalise on bitter infighting in the local Labour Party. Well, I'll be keeping you up to date on the story in Scotland throughout the night. Meanwhile, Kirsty Walk has news of another special election programme. Kirsty.
Yes, I'll be telling the UK story from a Scottish perspective over on BBC Two for viewers in Scotland, starting in about 5 minutes' time. As Jane said, it's going to be a fascinating night here. A small historical fact: the Act of Union between England and Scotland was signed 290 years ago today. On the basis of the exit poll, will the union be stronger or weaker after tonight? All that and more with me through the night over in BBC Two. Back to you in London, David.
Thanks very much, Jane. Well, Tony, we've had one result in. The turnout was down, which is why it wasn't the raw figure that you gave. The prediction is online for a wipeout.
The prediction is absolutely online. The swing at the general election of 1945, Labour's biggest victory ever by a very wide margin, was spot on 12%. The swing in a safe Labour seat, 11%. It does look as though Labour is on course for perhaps the biggest victory in its history.
We heard Michael Heseltine saying that the Tories have got to analyse Robin Oakley, analyse what went wrong, even though Michael Portillo was being a bit squeamish. What do you think is going to happen if it's a defeat on this scale?
Well, it's not so much a case of back to the drawing board as buy a new drawing board, I think, David. The Tories will be absolutely devastated if the figures are on the scale indicated by the exit poll and confirmed by the first result that we've had. Obviously, it means that Mr. Major will depart, and probably fairly quickly, as party leader. But the Tories are going to have to face up to the fact that Labour have managed to successfully occupy the centre ground of politics, which is nearly always the way of winning elections. And there's obviously a very clear lesson for them in this, that, as we have always believed, divided parties don't win elections.
It was interesting, Michael Portillo was saying exactly that, and if he stands as a leadership candidate, if John Major goes, it's clear his line is going to be unity. I mean, he has been rather more quiet in the last few months than he was before, hasn't he?
Unity, 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 as I think he put it in the fashionable triple back at the Tory party conference.
Malcolm Rifkin there at his count at Edinburgh Pentlands. No clue from his... Well, he looks fairly cheerful. He looks fairly cheerful, but then he's a stoic politician and a Scottish lawyer to boot, so probably he can put on a good face. We don't know what his result is. We haven't had any indication. It was thought that he possibly might hang on in Edinburgh Pentlands. Let's see how things stand at the moment then. We've had only one result in, and we're forecasting Tony Blair to be Prime Minister with a landslide. We're saying it'll be the lowest share for the Conservatives since 1832. Purists may say that's not the United Kingdom, but Britain we're going back to, but I don't think it makes that much difference. That's since the Duke of Wellington led the Tories after the Great Reform Act. And Labour is predicted to gain the biggest swing to any party since 1931. John Prescott, the Deputy Labour leader, said this is a remarkable testament to the courage and vision of Tony Blair. And Michael Heseltine, Deputy Prime Minister, speaking on Radio 4, if the polls are right, and we have actually lost, then there have to be a lot of questions asked and a lot of answers produced. Well, that at least means that the discussion can start tonight. Paddy Ashdown, the Liberal Democrat leader, we've put forward a very clear message to the electorate, and they have responded to it. They've been doing rather well, 18% what they got last time, but they think their seats may be up. Certainly at risk as the night runs through, and we'll be at these counts and hear from them if they lose or indeed if they win their seats. Malcolm Rifkin, the Foreign Secretary, Ian Lang, the Trade Secretary, Michael Forsyth, the Scottish Secretary, and William Walgrave, Treasury Chief Secretary, or Chief Secretary to the Treasury, as is more normally put. Tony Newton, the Leader of the House of Commons, Roger Freeman, the Public Service Minister, the Environment Secretary, John Gummer, and the former Heritage Secretary, MP David Mellor in Putney. Now, Krishnan Gurumurthy was talking a moment ago to Lord Archer, who was going to be giving a party tonight. I don't know whether he still is or whether he's cancelled it after he heard our exit poll, but let's join him.
Well, with me now is Lord Archer. Lord Archer, you're holding a small dinner party this evening. Is it a wake?
Certainly not. We don't even know the results yet.
Well, we have a good indication from the exit poll, at least. What's your reaction to that?
Well,
it's a landslide according to that.
I remember the exit poll last time, and it was certainly bear no relation to the actual result several hours later.
But you're not expecting the same result as last time tonight,
no,
are you?
I think that is unlikely. I would agree.
And so how do you think it's going to go?
It's hard to tell at this point, but I would suspect we are set for a Labour victory.
And what do you think that means?
That means 5 years of Labour power.
What does it mean for the Conservatives?
Well, we will have to regroup. We'll have to reconsider our position. And we will have to make sure we're good in opposition. And I suspect, having handed over the strongest economy in Europe, and indeed one of the biggest successes of this century, we'll have to see, with the Labour Party starting with such a good start, such advantages, what they do with it.
Well, you've been saying Britain's booming, don't let Labour blow it. Are they going to blow it? Is Britain going down the tubes now?
I hope they don't blow it. If that is the result, if Mr. Blair is the Prime Minister, I wish him every success, and I congratulate him on his victory. And of course we will attempt to be good in opposition, something we haven't done for a long time. We don't have the experience of the Labour Party in opposition, but then they don't have our experience in government.
And who are you backing for the leadership?
Well, now, a deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, the man who wrote the House of Cards, and the man who incidentally was involved in all the negotiations about the debate, which you remember we were going to get. We don't, not yet on the record exactly how it fell apart, but anyway, we were going to get this great debate between the two party leaders, or the three party leaders. Anyway, he is there, Michael Dobbs, and he's with John Sopel.
Mr. Dobbs, Edwina Currie this evening has said that the Tory campaign was a campaign run by kids. It's been a shambles, she said.
Well, perhaps I can thank Edwina for all the helpful advice that she has given to us during the campaign, and perhaps get on to some more serious subjects. I mean, if these exit polls are accurate, and we are going to lose tonight, I can still stand here and say that I take tremendous pride in having helped fight elections for 18 years. You know, when we fought the 1979 election, we took over a country which was crucified by discontent, split apart, and if we are handing the country over to another government tonight, it's a country which has a strong economy, which is, they're not riots in the streets.
But if you have done so well, why have you done so badly?
Because I suspect there is simply a mood in the country for change. There are no great demands for a Labour government out there. There are no great riots against the Conservative Party out there. There is simply a decision for time for a change. And that has proved to be, I think, a pretty overwhelming appeal.
The other thing that Edwina Currie said before your Central Council conference in Bath was that if John Major loses, he should go quickly.
Well, I suspect there'll be other voices within the Conservative Party which will be heard rather more seriously than Edwina's. Edwina hasn't been at the centre of this campaign. I think she should have gone back to South Derbyshire rather than Belfast to fight her campaign. I hope, for the sake of those in South Derbyshire, all those Conservatives in South Derbyshire, that the result there is a good one.
Michael Dobbs, thank you very much indeed. Back to you, David.
So, Peter, if we were to have a look on the basis of this swing at the kind of seats that Labour should be targeting, what would they be?
Right. Now, let's have a look at how Labour's targeting is set and what will happen if their targeting is effective. This is our way of doing it. This is our Labour targets fly-around, as we call it. You can see how they're ranked by the size, the blue block, and this is 3 yellow blocks and 1 green block for Plaid Cymru over there in Ceredigion, 3 gold blocks for the Liberal Democrats. These blocks represent the gap between Labour and these targets. And this is not the battleground as such, it's the battleground for Labour. It's Labour's targets. Some of them, as you can see, like Tynemouth, the one I mentioned earlier, a middle-sized block. Mr. Blair has to shoot that one down in order to get a Labour majority at all. Portsmouth North, a socking great big block here, majority of about 9,000 down there in the general election. If Mr. Blair hits targets like that, he's going to win a landslide majority. So what we'll be doing is flying around the country, looking at the little boxes down here, the hits and the misses, as we go through the night. And if Mr. Blair can hit something like half of these targets, or just over half, as he crosses them when the real results start coming in. There's London coming up there with Simon Hughes's Southwark and Bermondsey seat, a great block of gold in the middle there. Now we go across the Midlands with a little glimpse of Rochdale, another target for Labour. That should go down quite easily because Labour are way ahead of the Liberal Democrats. Up in Scotland, there's Malcolm Rifkin waiting to be shot at. Stirling, a tiny tile there, Michael Forsyth's seat. And a seat up there at Inverness, which is also a Labour target. So there they are. Watch what happens through the night. Notice there are 3 essential clusters of seats for Mr. Blair to aim at. The northwest up here and Bradford and Leeds, vital targets there. Birmingham and the area around there. Incidentally, Bury North is just a right size. There's a Bury seat there, which Mr. Blair needs to hit if he's to get an overall majority. And then London, an essential cluster of targets here in the home counties in London. For example, quite an easy one to hit, just peeping out from under here, Angela Rumbold's seat in Mitcham and Morden. Easy one for Labour to cap. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, let's go to Mitcham and Morden and hear perhaps a bit about Angela Rumbold, but also about the targets in London and how Labour appear to be doing. Emily Buchanan is there. Emily?
Well, in Mitcham Morden here, the Labour Party is actually holding its cards quite close to its chest, and although there was some applause after the result in Sunderland South, they're not being overly outward about their celebrations yet. I spoke to a Conservative Party strategist and canvasser here who was completely baffled by what the exit polls are saying. He was saying that if the exit polls are right, then the Conservative Party has to totally rethink the way it does its canvassing, because many of the voters he's spoken to seem to be implying that they had a lot of enthusiasm for Angela Rumbold, and he would even have been predicting Angela Rumbold increasing her majority, which of course looks very unlikely according to the exit polls.
What you say is very interesting, because it only needs just under a 2% swing for Angela Rumbold to be defeated, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it looks like a key target seat which Labour ought to easily win. In fact, it's one of the many seats around the inner city which Labour has been targeting to show that it can move into the suburbs of London. But we've also heard news of some of the marginals outside of London. In St Albans, for instance, we hear that Labour may be moving from third place to first place. And we've also heard that possibly in an unprecedented way, Labour may actually win 5 seats in Hertfordshire and 5 seats in Kent, traditionally very, very strong Tory seats.
Emily, thanks very much. Now, Carol Walker is in Birmingham, covering the whole Midlands scene. You heard what was said down there in Mitcham and Morden. Have you got any indications of whether the kind of wipeout that we've been talking about is likely to happen in the Midlands?
Well, that certainly looks like a strong possibility. Here at the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham, we're looking at the biggest multiple count in the land, 11 seats being counted here. A couple of early key marginals, which I think will give us a very clear idea of the way things are going. Birmingham Edgbaston, we're hoping to have within the next hour. Now, that is a seat that has been a Conservative seat for 75 years, used to be Dame Jill Knight's seat, and Gisela Stewart for the Labour Party has very high hopes of achieving a 5% swing. Now, that is 67 on Labour's target list of seats. So if that one falls to the Labour Party, that should give us a pretty clear indication of the way things are going. Shortly after that, we should be getting Birmingham Hall Green, another seat that's never ever been a Labour seat, and Councillor Stephen McCabe for Labour, high hopes of a 4% swing there. That one's number 51 on Labour's list of targets. And incidentally, also here, we have Sir Norman Fowler, who's got the second safest Tory seat in the land in Sutton Coldfield. And I must say, there is speculation that he might end up being virtually the only Conservative MP in this whole area.
OK, Carol, thanks very much. And Sarah Barclay in Bury North.
Well, in Bury North, it's the sitting MP Alistair Burt, the Tory minister who set up the Child Support Agency, and it looks as if the result could be very close indeed, much closer, I think, than people had thought before. The Labour candidate, David Chater, is not particularly well known locally. Alistair Burt has been a popular MP here for 14 years, and it looks as if the result could be very close. Other seats to watch up here are Chester, which has never been Labour before and which needs only a small percent swing to take it, Rochdale, Southport and Hazel Grove, which the Lib Dems will be fighting for very hard indeed, and in Blackpool, North and South, neither of which have ever been Labour before, it looks as though the Labour Party could win, particularly in Blackpool South.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Hamilton South, where we have a declaration.
Brown, Referendum Party, 316. Colin Stewart Gunn, Pro-Life Alliance, 684. Robert Dow Kilgour, the Scottish Conservatives and Unionist candidate, 2858. Richard Pitts, Liberal Democrat, 1,693. George Robertson, the Labour Party candidate, 21,709. The number of spoil papers, 26. I declare that George Robertson has been duly elected to serve in Parliament as a member for the Hamilton South constituency. Thank you.
George Robertson, who is the shadow Scottish Secretary, probable Scottish Secretary in the Labour government, with a majority of 15,800 with the Scottish National Party there in second place, Conservatives in third. Let's just hear from Mr. Robertson.
Making Hamilton South the first constituency result in Scotland, and I think perhaps the second in the whole country. That is a great achievement. And of course, can I thank with you all of your staff, both here and in the polling stations all day, for a magnificent effort that added up. to the result here this evening, also to the police and to all those who have been involved in this count. This evening, we are here at a historic time when a historic decision has been taken for our whole country. It is clear from these first two results, and indeed from the exit polls, that there is going to be a Labour government in this country after 18 years, and that this country will move in a completely new and better direction. And in this campaign in Scotland, the Scottish Labour Party did it with Scotland, and we did it for Scotland, and for all the people in Scotland as well. And as we move forward now into a completely new era for our country, the people have placed their trust in us, and we will fulfil that trust for them as well.
George Robertson there, likely to be Secretary of State for Scotland. Well, we can now join Edwina Currie, who's with Martin Bashir at her count. She, remember, you said it would be a miracle if she won. Martin.
Thank you, David. Mrs. Currie, you've heard the BBC's own exit poll suggesting the worst Conservative share of the vote this century. Your reaction to that?
Well, I'm disappointed that it's as low as that. My prediction would have been about 33, 34% based on what we were finding here in South Derbyshire. But there is no doubt that we're going to have a very poor result tonight.
Who's to blame? What's gone wrong?
My impression from our polling here has been that people changed their minds, switched over, actually quite a long time ago, 92, 93 perhaps. But once Mr. Blair came in and started to revolutionise his party and modernise it, then a lot of the resistance to voting Labour also disappeared. And at that point, I think they had it made.
Has it been a problem with policies or simply with presentation?
I think it's been a bit of a problem with everything, and a serious analysis has to be done. But one thing's for certain. I've always said that the electorate here has never voted into office a party that is antagonistic to Europe. And that looks as if it's happening once again, that moving Eurosceptic, Martin, has done us no good whatsoever, and the electorate have rejected us.
You said earlier that if the Tories lost disastrously, then you would recommend that John Major shouldn't, in your words, hang about. Is that still your view?
Well, I know some of my pro-European colleagues feel that John Major ought to hang on and perhaps even stay till October or November for the sake of party unity.
Your view?
But I think that would be a disaster. I think it would be a tragedy for the man, who is an honourable and decent man, who's, I think, been very battered right through this campaign. My preference is that we should get the leadership contest underway as soon as this election is out of the way. And I hope they'll make the right choice.
Who's your favoured candidate for that leadership contest?
I think it depends who's going to come forward, who is prepared to put himself or herself into the ring.
Do you have a favourite yourself?
Well, my favourite used to be John Major. What I hope is that we have somebody who is wisely and sensibly pro-European and can carry the nation forward.
Mr. Michael Portillo has been mentioned as a potential leader. In fact, by a number of the national newspapers, they are naming him as the favourite. Your reaction to him as a potential leader?
Well, I think in this area, in the Midlands, in these marginal seats, somebody like Ken Clarke would go down much better. But then, of course, he is a Midlands member, and we know him very well in Nottinghamshire. And possibly after that, Michael Heseltine, if there are no worries about his health. After that, I think we should be looking at somebody like Jill Shepherd, if she holds her seat, which of course is being talked about. But we have to see. What I'm not certain about is an anti-European, very right-wing, rather extreme personality, or simply make sure that we go into the next election campaign in exactly the same sort of state we've gone into this one.
And that's Mr. Portillo as far as you're concerned?
They're all very good and honourable people, and they're all rather shrewd people. They may well get there by being right-wing, but they may then stay by being more sensible.
Thank you very much.
Martin Bashir with Edwina Currie. Well, she was talking about Michael Heseltine, but saying that she preferred Ken Clarke. Michael Heseltine himself, imperturbable as ever, arrived a moment ago at the Tory party headquarters in Smith Square in London. And that's the first big arrival there. We've been told that a number of ministers are going to turn up there over the night. So, let's hear a bit more now from Jeremy. Jeremy, to you.
David,
one thing I should say, I don't know whether you heard, but the two reporters, I thought rather interesting, two reporters, one in the northwest and one in the southeast, Mitcham and Morden, saying that what they were hearing on the ground was that the swing wasn't of the scale, or the wipeout wasn't of the scale that we picked up on the exit poll. I mean, whether this is right or wrong, one doesn't know until one gets results from there, but obviously either the Tories are bluffing or something slightly different is happening from what we said.
Very interesting. I don't know, we'll find out. Perhaps I might get some indication now. We're going to be talking, I think, to Stephen Dorrell, who joins us from his count. How bad is it, Mr. Dorrell?
Well, the answer is, of course, we don't know whether it's good or bad until the votes have been counted. Both in 1987 and in 1992, we were served up exit polls which predicted Labour governments, and in the event there wasn't a Conservative government elected by the voters. So we don't know what the result is, and I don't think it's very sensible to speculate about it when we all know that the result, the true result, is going to be available within a few hours.
Do you agree with Edwina Currie that it was the divisions in your party, and particularly the behaviour of the Eurosceptics, that did for you?
I don't accept by any means that the result of the election has yet been decided, or at least that it's yet known. I do agree with what I heard Michael Portillo saying earlier on in your programme, namely that a party that presents a united face to the electorate is a party that strengthens its claim to their support. But that is clearly true.
If a party cannot be forced into unity by one leader, isn't it time to change the leader?
No, I don't think that we need to get into speculation about what the lessons are from a result that we don't yet know.
So you think John Major should stay?
I think we should. It is better for us to take these issues one at a time. The first thing we need to know is what is the decision that the voters have made. And only when we know that can we then start to think about what lessons the voters have been seeking to teach the Conservative Party.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you. We're also joined now by Malcolm Rifkin, the Foreign Secretary, from his count. How bad is it for you, Mr. Rifkin?
Well, I don't know any more than you do at the moment. They're just beginning to add up the total votes before they distribute them between the candidates, so you'll have to be patient just a little bit longer.
Just so we're clear that the Cabinet is at least united on this matter, you do share the view of Stephen Dorrell and Michael Portillo that what damaged you, what did for you, was the fact that you were divided.
Well, I think there are a number of factors, but obviously any party that gives the impression of not being united, that cannot help you in an election.
Are you confident you'll hang on to your own seat?
I'm extremely hopeful. There's some quite encouraging signs, but I frankly don't know any more than you do at this stage. I would be guessing.
Being hopeful isn't quite the same as being confident, is it?
Well, it's because you're asking me to predict it. I mean, are you just wanting me to use the usual optimism that all candidates use, or are you trying to find out if I have some privileged access to information? I haven't counted the ballots yet, so I don't actually know any more than you do, but I'm very happy to sound optimistic.
How long do you think John Major will stay as leader?
As long as he wishes.
What do you mean, beyond tomorrow?
I'm sure much longer than that.
Malcolm Rifkin, thank you very much. David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, now, Tony King, let's just go back to that second result we had in Scotland, Hamilton South.
Yes, we shouldn't ignore the result in Hamilton South, quite apart from the fact that George Robinson is likely to be a cabinet minister within the next 36 hours. In fact, the swing in Hamilton, if we look just at the swing from Conservatives to Labour, was 8%. Our exit poll was predicting a swing from Conservatives to Labour in Scotland of almost exactly 8%. So it does look as though the exit poll is more or less spot on. We may produce a slightly smaller majority than was earlier anticipated, but it is still going to be an enormously good result. Notice the other thing about Hamilton South is the Scottish National Party actually losing a few percentage points. This was going to be, they hoped, a big night for the SNP. Well, it didn't work out quite that way in that particular constituency near Glasgow.
We're joined by the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Heseltine, from the Conservative Party headquarters. Mr. Heseltine, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Well, you've already started to say that this campaign needs careful analysis, suggesting that you accept it hasn't quite worked out as you hoped.
Well, the opinion polls haven't worked out, and the exit polls haven't worked out, and the first result hasn't worked out. But as everybody knows, these are not yet an analysis of the full results, and we therefore have to be cautious about it. But it is certainly disappointing at this stage.
Michael Portillo says that it's disunity that was the problem for the Tory party. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's important to have a mature period of reflection, to look at all the questions, all the answers. And what is critical is that the party finds a way to regroup, unite, and begin the fight back. We are a hugely successful political party, governing this country far longer than any other political party. And what I do think is a great danger is now to sort of get into a sort of onion-peeling process in the heat of election results, which are frankly, the analysis is better done within the private discussions that must go on within the Conservative Party.
What does regroup mean?
Regroup is simply what you do when you have found yourself on the wrong end of an election defeat, if that's what happens to us.
Does it imply that the Prime Minister will resign as leader of the party?
Well, I hope not. I've spent, well, whatever months and years it is, doing everything I could to help him govern the country, to win this election campaign, and I think that he has proved of the highest caliber as a Prime Minister. I have no doubt at all that his period in office will be seen as having laid the economic rocks of opportunity for this country as the next century dawns. He has proved a very extraordinary leader of our country, and I had very much wanted to see him re-elected to that job, and I hope still, but however, the polls don't indicate it, that it would have been the position.
But surely if he's led you to the worst defeat for the Tories since the Duke of Wellington, you can't be saying that he should continue to lead you to the next election.
Well, people have spent quite a lot of time trying to separate myself off from the Prime Minister, and they've always failed. I've been proud to serve him and greatly honoured when he made me Deputy Prime Minister. I've given him every support, and as long as he's leader of the Conservative Party, he will continue to get that support.
So you're saying you're standing beside him until he makes his decision? You don't have any inkling what his decision would be?
No, I am going to back him all the way, because without the slightest shadow of doubt, on the record, he has achieved what very, very, very few leaders of our party and Prime Ministers have done, an economic prospect which is glittering as the next century dawns.
And why should the electorate have sleepwalked, in your words, to disaster?
Well, those are the sort of questions we'll have to ask ourselves. And as I said, I don't myself go for the sort of unimpeding technique within hours of the polls closing. I think these require mature reflection. A lot of very senior colleagues will want to play their part in it. And there is absolutely nothing to be gained from a debate when one person says one thing, one says another, one asks one question, one gives a different answer. That is a way which is very fascinating to the media, but it is not the best interest of the Conservative Party.
But of course it did sound as if you weren't blaming your colleagues, but blaming the electorate when you said they were sleepwalking to disaster if they voted Labour. The voters out there are at fault.
I must tell you that whilst I have to respect the verdict, if that is what it is to be, I have to tell you that the views that the Prime Minister expressed of the consequences of Labour government will become apparent rather more rapidly, I suspect, than people have ever realised.
Mr. Heseltine, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Michael Heseltine, Deputy Prime Minister. And now we go around some of the key seats, the ones that will give us an indication of how things are going in this election. Andrew Harvey, first of all, is in Norwich North. Andrew.
Yeah, David, we were hearing the message from the southeast and the northwest about the Conservative vote holding up rather better. That's the message we're getting from East Anglia too. They do claim that their vote's holding up. They simply don't believe the exit poll figures. Mind you, that's not going to help them very much in Norwich North because it only needs a 2% swing here to push the seat over to Labour. Labour in Norwich has the reputation of being one of the best organised party in the country, and that may have been crucial in bringing the important votes in. We're expecting a declaration here in about an hour's time. They've put double the number of normal counters on here. They've got 100 people working away at the ballot boxes, so we should get a declaration from Norwich North in about an hour's time.
OK, thanks, Andrew. And Mark Mardell in Basildon. Of course, Basildon was the seat that told everybody that the Tories had not only not done as badly, had done a great deal better than the exit poll suggested last time round. What's the story tonight?
Yes, I think that's right. That early indication last time, there was that huge grin on the face of David Amess, which I think is seared on the minds of many Labour supporters, that first indication. Well, it ain't going to happen again, partly because Mr Amess has fled to a safer seat, but also it seems that Labour have done very well here. They're pretty confident they've taken the seat. Interestingly, they say a lot of votes going from the Conservatives to the referendum candidate here. So that may be one reason, but it's an important seat because it's one that was Labour in the dim and distant past, was taken by the Tories in the Thatcherite revolution of '79 and has never been taken back. So we're expecting a result here about 1/2 from Basildon.
And Michael Crick in Wolverhampton South West. Michael.
Yes, well, the big question here, David, is whether one of the great parliamentary mavericks, Nick Budgeon, can hold on. Mr Budgeon inherited this seat, Wolverhampton South West, from Enoch Powell 23 years ago, and holds very similar views to Mr Powell on things like Europe, where he was one of the whipless rebels over Maastricht and so on. And indeed, he's raised the issue of immigration in this campaign. Now, the parties here are saying they think it'll be close, but if the exit poll and if the result in Sunderland is reflected here, then certainly Mr Budgeon will lose. And I was going around the polling station stations this afternoon, and I found that roughly 1 in 6 of the people who said that they'd voted for Mr Budgen last time haven't done so today, in which case the House of Commons will lose one of its great independent spirits.
Thank you very much, Michael. And Jill Dando, lastly, in Portsmouth North. Jill?
Well, David, there does seem to be an aura of Labour confidence here. Now, whether that translates into local seats remains to be seen. We should know in about an hour's time, because both constituencies, Portsmouth North, Portsmouth South, they're both being counted here, and they're both aiming to declare at the same time. Now, Portsmouth North has traditionally been quite a safe Tory seat, but this time it's definitely a race between the Tory holder, the Peter Griffiths, and the Labour candidate, a very local, well-liked man. He's been in politics for 26 years, Sid Rapson. Now, he has said to us that he is allowing himself to feel very confident tonight. If Labour win Portsmouth North, it'll be an 8% swing. It's 100th on Labour's target list. 69.9% turnout in Portsmouth North. Portsmouth South, again, a very interesting constituency. It was held on to in 1992 by the Conservative David Martin, as you may remember, by a very wafer-thin majority of 242. The Liberal Democrat Mike Hancock lost out then. You may remember Mike Hancock won for the SDP in 1984, subsequently lost to David Martin in 87. Now, the Lib Dems, it's second on their list. It needs just a 0.2% swing. But again, Labour are proving very strong in Portsmouth South. Their candidate, again, a local man, Alan Burnett, a university lecturer, and coincidentally, the university plays a very strong part in the Portsmouth life, about 11,000 students. So, of course, he may do very well. This was seen as a two-way marginal Portsmouth South, but it could very well go one of three ways. So a very exciting time here in Portsmouth.
Thanks very much. And now we go to our roving reporter, Frank Skinner.
Well, I'm in the borough of Harrogate and Knaresborough, and I'm looking for the returning officer. Philip!
Hello, Frank.
How are you? Good to see you.
There?
Nice necklace.
Oh,
so you're the mayor of Harrogate and Knaresborough?
yes, that's right.
That's a bit of a job and a half.
Oh, it's not too bad.
Come on, it's
Good
easy.
steady. Good
Now,
steady
tonight,
job.
Tonight you are the returning officer. It's quite posh up here, isn't it? The sort of place they keep a sheet of newspaper under the cuckoo clock.
That's right, yes. You've
Yeah.
heard, have you?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're the returning officer, and you'll be reading this speech tonight. And we'll hear lots of these tonight, so we've got to give it a spin.
Do you want me
for
to give
us.
it a go?
Yeah.
I, being the returning officer for the constituency of Harrogate and Knaresborough, do hereby declare...
Oh, you're a bit northern at the moment. You've gone common.
What's wrong with being northern?
Oh, they don't like that up here, then.
Do you want me to put my...
Put your posh Harrogate and
the
Knaresborough voice
posh
on.
Harrogate and
Yeah.
Knaresborough voice on. Right, here goes. I, being the returning officer for the constituency of Harrogate and Knaresborough, do hereby declare that the number of votes cast in this election are...
Cast, I like a lot. That's
with
good.
an R, you notice the R.
Oh,
in it.
very good. Now, your big star name up here is Norman Lamont.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, I wondered, because you hear this speech all night, you know, and the returning officer, blah, 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 if there's anything you could do with your speech that would maybe give it a bit more sparkle.
Well, I could put give it his... What, you mean do something to his name?
Well, Norman Lamont, for example.
Give it a French sound or native Scottish sound or something like
Yeah,
that.
let's
Right,
try
you
that.
mean like French? Let's do Le Mans.
That would be great.
Le Mans, without the T.
OK, it's a motor race, but also it could
Right.
be an MP, yeah.
But what about motor? What about Scottish descent?
Yeah.
He's got a Scottish. His descendant's Scottish. Right. Lamont.
That sounds...
Mr. Lamont.
That sounds good to me.
That's-
If
yeah.
you can stick one of them in for us tonight, and we'll be watching closely, that would be fantastic.
Right,
Now, you became a councillor the same day that Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister,
I
that's
did,
right.
yeah.
And what I like, you knew where you were with Mrs Thatcher.
Oh, you certainly knew where you were.
It was just being there without a paddle that I didn't like.
Ken Skinner there. And then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kenneth Clarke, arrived a moment ago at his count at Rushcliffe. He's been reviled by Nicholas Winterton, who actually said he'll be remembered, even reviled in history for his action, putting the blame for the poor Conservative general election campaign on Mr. Clarke, who's got a safe seat in Rushcliffe. And Sir George Gardner at Reigate, where he's standing for the referendum party, having insulted the Prime Minister and been kicked out by his own local party. And he's standing there. Not likely that he'll take that seat, but he's lost a lot of loyal Tories. And Sebastian Coe, down in the West Country. Three-way fight in Falmouth and Camborne. Liberal Democrats chasing him, and Labour hot on the heels of the Liberal Democrats. It's inside. It looks as though it's outside in daylight, but I think they're actually in a hall there. And Lance Price joins us now from Enfield, Michael Portillo's seat. Michael Portillo was here in the studio a moment ago, but he's gone on his way back to his count there. Lance, he's not in any trouble there, is he?
Well, it would be astonishing if he was. It would take a swing of approaching 15% for him to lose this seat here. But the indications are, no one is predicting that Michael Portillo is going to lose this seat, but the indications from the Labour side are that they have been doing particularly well in wards where they thought they didn't stand any chance at all, where until last week or the week before they weren't even really canvassing those wards, and they now think that they may have won them. So if that were to be the case, accompanied by a lower turnout perhaps among Conservative voters, then it could be a very tight result for Michael Portillo here.
Lance, thanks very much. Jeremy.
David, thank you very much. Well, we're joined now from his constituency in Hartlepool, from his count there, by Peter Mandelson, who will doubtless be accorded the accolade of being the architect of this Labour victory, if that's what it turns out to be. Our congratulations in order, Mr. Mandelson?
Not yet, Jeremy, because we don't know the result, but you are nonetheless very warmly welcome to Hartlepool.
Well, that's very illuminating. Now, what do you think was the thing that swung it for you?
What swung it was New Labour. I mean, people have been coming towards us steadily over the last 10 years, but it was the transformation of the Labour Party, the rebirth of the Labour Party in the last 2 or 3 years that finally clinched it for people.
Well, we have Neil Kinnock with us here in the studio. He was the man who gave you the job originally.
He did, in 1985.
Why could you do it for Tony Blair and not for him?
He had to go off and fight a seat in 1992. The boy's got to look after himself. Anyway, he's done brilliantly. And I don't think anybody can take that away from him, and I'm delighted for him. I just wish he'd grow his moustache back.
Okay. David.
No way.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Tony Blair's house, we thought we were going to see Mr. Blair coming out of his house, but the curtain's been very firmly drawn. So I think we'll wait for the curtain to flicker again.
Okay. I mean, the difference between then and now, given that it was Peter Mandelson, the campaign organiser in each case, was, I suppose, that in 1992 you had a change of image, but you hadn't junked a lot of the policies. Now you've had a change of image and junked the policies.
Well, the policies were changed, and as Peter said, well, yes, they were jettisoned. Some of the policies were jettisoned, others were extensively modified. But as Peter said, people were moving towards us. They needed, in some ways, first of all, reassurance that our changes weren't cosmetic, that they weren't simply electoral opportunism. And at the 1992 defeat, I said to the Parliamentary Labour Party, only time really would demonstrate that the changes were deep-rooted and completely sincere. And secondly, to some extent, and I say this with no joy at all, people had to learn that the forecasts that we made about what would happen under a further Conservative government were actually accurate, and I think they've had that demonstrated. It's a pity that people had to suffer features like negative equity in the meantime.
But if you ditched Clause 4, you might have won that election.
It's conceivable that it would have sharpened the mind of the party. I don't think that by itself would have made sufficient difference.
Peter Mandelson, all the forecasts are you will have a thumping great majority. Will that encourage Tony Blair to be what he told the Observer he was going to be, a lot more radical in government than he seemed during the campaign?
No, we will be implementing a radical set of policies, but they will only be the policies that are contained in our manifesto.
Well, they're not very radical.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. If we are elected as New Labour, as I think is going to be the case, we will govern as New Labour, and we will deliver what we have promised to deliver, nothing more and nothing less.
Peter Mandelson, thank you very much. David.
We're about to get a third result of the night declared by the returning officer in Wrexham. Only 2 results have so far been declared in this general election at the counts, and Wrexham is coming up, and this is North East Wales, and it's a safe Labour seat, mining area, and it's held by Dr. John Marrick, who's actually a mathematician, rather a quiet presence in the House of Commons. For 17 years or so he taught mathematics down at the university in Aberystwyth. And what will be interesting here, again, it's Labour in first place, 50% of the vote they got last time round. The Conservatives got 32%, the Liberal Democrats 15%. So it'll be an indication for us whether that exit poll is still standing up, as it has so far, Tony King, hasn't it?
It stood up very well so far. It'll be interesting to see whether John Marrick gets, depending on the turnout, about 23 or 24,000 votes. If turnout has stayed at its previous level, then that's what he should do. That did not happen in Sunderland South, which is why Chris Mullen didn't get quite as many votes as we were supposed to.
But the swing we'll be looking for would be sort of 11%,
will
roughly,
be,
something
will
like
be
that.
between 10 and 12%, absolutely.
Yes. They all seem to be standing there without much going on. I don't know what's happening, because all the candidates are there and the returning officer in the centre. It's like a sort of... It's like a sort of rather embarrassed school prize giving. They are early declarers by design. That's to say, they're one of those places. Torbay used to be one, but isn't this year because of the local elections, which makes a point of getting its face on the television screen by being an early declarer.
I just mentioned as they finish the bits and pieces that the turnout has been 71%.
Turnout of 71%, he says. Well, Robin, what do you make of this, the reports we've been having from our own correspondents out in the field, that the landslide doesn't feel to them in line with our exit poll? Do you think that's just...
I think that's what they're being told by Tory party workers and Tory agents. All through this campaign, we've had Tories saying they are absolutely baffled by the opinion poll figures. They can't understand why there isn't more feel-good factor coming through. And I think we're probably not getting as good a quality of canvasser as we used to get in the old days, particularly if too many people are doing telephone canvassing and not seeing the whites of their eyes. Because if you go around as a journalist at a by-election, you follow the canvassers to the doorstep, people on the doorstep are very polite. The British are a polite nation. They don't like to say they're not going to vote for somebody. And when you speak to them afterwards, they say, I wouldn't vote for that shower if they came down the driveway with a barrow full of fivers.
And the first reports from Conservative Central Office were they were shattered by the exit poll, and they were shattered by what they were hearing from their own constituencies.
I think they're quite genuinely surprised, because that's not the message they've got on the doorstep.
Yes. Tony Blair, first glimpse of him at his house, Marabella in Trimdon. He's going from there to the Count. There he is, the man who will be Prime Minister tomorrow when he goes to Buckingham Palace, probably late tomorrow morning. And that's Alistair Campbell, his press secretary. There's Mr. Blair behind. Well, there we are. Just a brief glimpse of Tony Blair. And he'll be going down to his Count. He's then going to go to the Trimdon Labour Club, and we'll hear from him there, and then we plan to go down south later on today. We're joined by Gordon Brown now, from Dunfermline East. Mr. Brown, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Well, it looks as though you're going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer by tomorrow afternoon.
Well, I think we'll wait and see. I think I'm waiting for my result. I think you've had two results so far. It looks as if Labour has done very well, but I was the one who said to all our candidates on Monday, take nothing for granted, and I will stick that way for the time being.
It's rare to see you smiling quite so much on a television interview, Mr. Brown. I suspect you...
I always smile when I'm interviewed by you, David.
Well, save the flattery. I suspect you know that you've won, and won by a very handsome margin.
Well, if we have won, I think it's not just a rejection of the Conservatives. It is about new Labour. It is about a new type of politics for this country. I think it's a desire on the part of everybody to tackle the very real social problems that form the basis of our manifesto. And it's a desire also that we have a government that will equip us for the future, a government that is on people's side, and I think that is why people have been voting Labour in increased numbers today.
How different is it from having, say, a majority of 30 or 40, if you really do have a landslide on the scale of 1945, in terms of what you can do in government and what you plan to do? I mean, we remember Tony Blair saying he'd be more radical than people thought.
Well, by radical, what Tony Blair meant is that we'll tackle the problems of education. We'll tackle the problems of the health service. We'll tackle the problems of unemployment. This was a manifesto about change in Britain and about making possible a country that is properly equipped for the future. So we are ready to get to work if that is the verdict of the country. It is not simply a rejection of the Conservative Party, it's an endorsement for a new type of politics, and we fully intend to bring that about.
But there's not an element in that we're going to be more radical than people thought, of we are the masters now, the famous phrase that was uttered the last time Labour had a landslide like this.
Not at all, not at all. We will honour our manifesto, we'll fulfil it. I think the feature of this election is that people thought the Conservatives, and rightly so, had betrayed the trust that they had got from the British people in 1992. It was a record of broken promises. We are determined that there is a bond of trust between a new government and the British people, and it certainly would be my intention, whatever job I hold, it would be my intention to build that trust between the government and the people. This is not just a result about the past. This is a result that is an endorsement for a new type of politics it is now our duty to bring about.
I thought you had been assured that you were going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I don't think you take anything for granted. As I said to all my candidates on Monday, I'll wait and see.
Okay, Mr. Brown, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Wrexham about to
Conservative
declare.
Party candidate, 8,688. Cronk, John Edward, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,195. Lowe, Nicholas John, Natural Labour Party, 86. Marrick, John, the Labour Party candidate, 20,450. Plant, James Kevin, Plaid Cymru, 1,170. Thomas, Andrew Martin, Liberal Democrat, 4,833. And that John Marrick has been duly elected to serve as member for the Wrexham constituency. The number of ballot papers rejected...
So John Marrick holds the seat, his majority 11,700. Conservatives in second place, but, and a big but, this is the swing in this third result. 7% from Conservative to Labour, so a lower swing, well above the amount that's needed for a substantial Labour victory, but below the kind of 11% swing that we got from the first two seats. Tony, what do you make of that?
That's absolutely right. It does look as though there's going to be a considerable drop in the turnout in these very safe Labour seats. And it's very hard to say what the effect on the swing of that is going to be. But notice, as you said a moment ago, a swing of 70% would have Mr.
Of 7%.
7%.
70% would have...
It's the kind of language we've been talking till now. Would have Mr. Blair very comfortably in Downing Street indeed.
Tony, Peter.
Well, David, yes, you have to see how cautious you must be about these early results, because here we have now, there's the pendulum at 0, and the swing, of course, is to Labour. Now, here is the swing in Wrexham. On beyond 4.5% that Labour leave an overall majority, but stopping at some 7.5% to Labour. Now, we think from our exit poll that these safe Labour seats like Wrexham, and I'm going to go on now to Sunderland South, and Sunderland South, are likely to produce smaller swings than the seats held by the Conservative, particularly the Conservative marginal seats. But of course we can't be sure until we get real results from those seats. But that Wrexham swing clearly is rather under what our exit poll was suggesting might happen in safe Labour seats. So we have to be cautious, but we're still looking at a very solid Labour majority indeed. We're waiting for a Conservative held seat before we can be certain, David.
Thank you very much. I think that the Tories may well have conceded Southport to the Liberal Democrats, but we shall hear about that in a moment. Jeremy.
David. Well, now, Cecil Parkinson, you're now chairman of a fertiliser firm. How deep is the mess you're in at present?
Well, I think we're clear. I'm chairman of a number of other companies too, by the way, and it's artificial fertiliser.
That just seems the most appropriate one.
Artificial fertiliser, just for the record.
Oh,
Chemical fertiliser. Very dangerous stuff to immerse oneself in. Well, I think that clearly we're not going to have a good evening. It's very early days. I would have thought it's fairly clear we will have a Labour victory. But I think I don't buy any of this analysis about disunity and so on. We've just been there for 18 years. It's 23 years since the Labour Party last won an election. And I think the mood that I found going around the country, people were saying, look, it's just time for a change. I was coming down in a train the other day from Birmingham. A couple of businessmen said, look, I'm doing very well, but I just feel you've been there long enough. It's time for a change. And I think that that is the most emotive political argument. And I think it's a very compelling one when a party's been in power for as long as we have.
David Steele, we've yet to have a Liberal Democrat, a meaningful Liberal Democrat result from anywhere, but from where you stand, what is actually happening? Do you share Cecil Parkinson's view? It's just general ennui?
I share that very much. I think the Conservative Party was on a hiding to nothing at the start of this campaign. Supposing there'd never been any divisions, supposing the economy was wonderful and all the things the Prime Minister said was true, I still think that they would have lost, because I think that there has been a mood for change, coupled with the modernisation of the Labour Party and a strong Lib Dem campaign. I think they had no chance of winning. In fact, they messed it up as well, but that's why they're losing so badly.
It does sort of tie in with what you were saying, Neil Kinnock, doesn't it? That it needed that extra term, in your view, in order for for Labour to go that extra distance?
In some respects, yes. But what makes the difference between the scenario that David describes rightly and what's happening now is the way in which the electorate punishes divided parties. And we've got every reason to know in the Labour Party that that punishment can be savage. Yeah. I think that one of the major factors, not the only one, that's actually producing this outcome tonight is the way in which the Conservative Party, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, has given the impression that it takes itself more seriously than it takes the country. We, for a short period, gave that impression. We've been paying the price ever since. And I believe that the Conservative Party is in that experience now. Naturally, I hope that it will continue for some time.
Cecil Parkinson, when do you think that the party started to fall apart?
I don't think the party
Well, you were talking about divisions.
I don't think the party has fallen apart. I say that that has not been particularly relevant. The fact that the Conservative Party is the only party of the two major parties, the only one of the two, that has had a real debate on what is a critical issue.
Yeah, but it's done it in public.
I don't think... Well,
I'm going to interrupt you there because Tony Blair is there leaving his house.
Tony Blair now leaving Marabella, his house. In Trimdon, a crowd outside. The man who will be the next Prime Minister. Well, being congratulated by people in his Sedgefield constituency. Just a brief appearance, I think, before he sets off to the Labour Club or goes down to the Count.
Let's just wait and see, shall we?
Still being cautious, let's just wait and see.
Taking across the county.
Throughout this campaign, of course, he's been constantly saying we mustn't count our chickens before they're hatched. He'll be only the 5th Labour Prime Minister this century if he gets this job, or when he gets this job, because we're certain he will. Age 44, one of the youngest. Well, Robin, we've only had 3 results in. We're talking all the time about this landslide for Labour. 7% in Wrexham. Pretty good landslide.
It still looks very, very hopeful for Labour. There's nothing we've had on any of the figures from any of the seats declared so far to make us doubt the indications of the exit poll. Labour have undoubtedly had a very successful campaign. It was an amazingly disciplined and professional campaign, and they managed to stick to their chosen subjects all the way through. Tony Blair stuck to the idea of deliverable promises, measurable things on class sizes, hospital waiting lists, kind of things that resonated with the electorate in practical terms, compared to the Tories talking in a much more general sense about concepts like choice and opportunity, which really didn't go down the same way.
What's the effect going to be politically if they do have a very large majority? Is that going to mean they get trouble from the Labour left wing over Europe, for instance, over other issues, pressure to spend more money if the economy goes on recovering, pressure to do things that Tony Blair was very cautious about?
Well, it was a former Tory Chief Whip, Francis Pym, who incurred Lady Thatcher's ire for suggesting that too big a majority wasn't a good thing. But it's significant that it was a former Chief Whip who said that, because you do tend to get much more cutting loose on the backbenches when backbenchers feel that they can afford to indulge a protest, and a smaller majority acts rather more as a discipline.
Okay, you may have seen that headline go across. We'll have all the results, incidentally, on the screen during the night. Sunderland North went across as a Labour hold, and this is the result. This is the 4th result to come in. Let's just see it. And it's held by William Etherington. It's a very safe Labour seat, but the key thing again is the swing. And it's in line, it confirms 10% swing from Conservative to Labour. He's been there since 1992. So we have had 4 results in so far. We're saying on the basis of that Tony Blair will be Prime Minister and that he is going to have a landslide. And what we're predicting is that it'll be the biggest ever Commons majority for Labour, and the lowest Conservative share of the vote since over 150 years ago. Peter Mandelson, who managed this campaign for Labour, told us a moment ago what swung it was simply New Labour. It was the transformation of the Labour Party, the rebirth of the Labour Party. And Malcolm Rifkin, speaking from Edinburgh Pentlands, his constituency, said any party that gives the impression of not being united doesn't help itself during an election campaign. Edwina Currie in Derbyshire South. It's clear that going Eurosceptic didn't help the Conservatives one jot, and it didn't bring in votes. It drove voters away. And these are the highlights of the night so far. We just had the Sunderland North result. Here are the other three results we've had, and you'll see the evidence of the swing there. Sunderland South, that was the first one that came in, Chris Mullin, with an 11% swing. And then there was Wrexham, where John Marrick held the seat, the swing rather smaller there, 7%, but still very nearly double what Labour needs to form an overall majority. George Robertson's seat, Hamilton South, where the SNP come in second place, so the swing is not a two-party swing shown in the normal way, so we don't show it. But he did well there. And Putney, the count is going on there. David Mellor, Sir James Goldsmith, Anthony Coleman, the Labour challenger rather, the leader of Merton Council. And as we were saying a moment ago, all of the millionaires. There's David Mellor, looking fairly chirpy. He lost his post in Cabinet as Chief Secretary of the Treasury and then as Heritage Minister over a number of indiscretions, and he was almost unseated by the Conservatives in Putney. They mounted a challenge against him, but he survived that. He'd gone on to make a career in broadcasting, but does a massive amount of consultancy work as well, and may not be in much difficulty in Putney. There's a lull while the counts go on. Oldham East there. John Hudson for the Conservatives there. That would need a very small swing for Oldham East to be taken. Basildon, where we were a moment ago. Labour's 29th target. Mitcham and Morden, where Dame Angela Rumbold is defending a majority of just under 2,000, needs only a very tiny swing there. And Nick Budgeon's seat. There's Mr. Budgeon himself in Wolverhampton, looking concerned. Everybody waiting. We've only had 4 results in. It's going very slowly tonight, as I said it would, because of the county councils in England being sorted out. The ballot papers being sorted out. It takes just simply twice as long to open up the ballot boxes and separate the ballot papers out before you can actually start the process of counting. And incidentally, Sunderland South rather, broke the record by 10 minutes, 47 minutes. They counted Chris Mullin's seat in. Tony.
Can I just say one thing that I think people are losing track of? There's been a lot of talk of the campaign and whether the Labour Party did well during the campaign thanks to Peter Mandelson. The Tories did very badly because of their disunity. But it seems to me perfectly obvious that the campaign, the last few weeks, has had very little to do with the actual outcome. This election was decided months, if not years ago. It was decided when the Conservatives made a shambles of managing the economy just after the last election. It was decided when Tony Blair became leader of the Labour Party and did such an extraordinary job of changing the party's constitution and its policies. If this election had been held a year ago or 2 years ago, the outcome would have been almost exactly the same. I think this focus on the campaign, this focus on a very short time period is a mistake.
Let's go and find out a bit about how the Liberal Democrats are doing. We saw that they were polling 18%, something like that, back where they were last time round, but that they could have a better result this time. Alenka Frenkel is in Torbay. Let's go there first of all. Alenka, the Liberal Democrats got any chance of taking that seat?
Well, in the last few minutes, it is beginning to look as though that is a possibility. The Liberal Democrats are desperately hoping that this will be the breakthrough they've been looking for here, particularly in the southwest. What they're really hoping for is that if there is an anti-Tory, pro-Labour swing, that they could perhaps benefit from it and wipe out the 5,500 majority that Rupert Allison, the Conservative sitting MP, also known as Nigel West, author of spy thriller writer, that they can wipe that majority out. I've just seen behind me in the trays there that the Liberal Democrat, who is an experienced parliamentarian in the sense that he's been working in the Parliamentary Whip's office, and he's a Paddy Ashdown man, that his votes have been stacking up, and they do now appear to be more plentiful than Rupert Allison's. They're rather upset here at Torbay, actually, because they're normally one of the first to declare, but on this occasion, all the presiding officers were stacked up in their cars with the ballot boxes and searched for a full 15 to 20 minutes before they were allowed to come in, and it has sort of rather held them up.
OK, Alenka, well, thanks very much. Do you know how soon it'll be before we get that result about?
Well, they're talking about 20 past 12, half past 12.
Right, thanks very much. That's an hour and a bit. Nick Hyam is in Oldham East and Saddleworth, Nick, what's going to happen there?
Well, nobody's very clear. This is a new seat which was created out of Littleborough and Saddleworth, a constituency which went Liberal Democrat after being many years Conservative in 1995, and a former Oldham Central seat, which of course is fairly safe Labour. It's on paper a three-way marginal. Either party, any party could win it. In practice tonight, it's a Liberal Democrat Labour marginal. It seems that there could be as little as 200 or 300 votes separating the parties. The turnout has been quite high, nearly 75%, which might be thought to favour Labour, but their turnout has been lower in some of the wards where they hope to do well. So it's a very close run thing indeed. I think there's every likelihood that there could be a recount. We were expecting a result at about 1:45, but clearly if there's a recount it could be later here in Oldham East and Saddleworth.
It was a spectacularly nasty by-election, at least everybody said it was. Has it been a nasty general election fight there?
Doesn't seem to have been. The Labour were very tough on the Liberal Democrats in the by-election. They accused the Liberal Democrat candidate of being soft on drugs and hard on taxes. This time round it seems to have been much more gentlemanly, much quieter, and that I think is because the national spotlight hasn't been on it in the way that it was during a by-election campaign.
Thanks very much, Nick. Well, we join Shankar Guha now in Rochdale, where again there's always been a very bitter battle going on between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. Is Liz Lynn going to hold on there for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, it's way too early to say, and I'm afraid the indications from the various agents and people we've been talking to don't give us many clues at this stage. In theory, of course, this should be a very easy target for Labour. It's the fourth most vulnerable marginal in the country, and they only need a 0.1% swing to shift Liz Lynn, who is the Lib Dems Social Security spokesman. And unfortunately at the moment we're not getting very much of a clear picture as to which way it's going. It could go either way.
Liz Lynn took over from Cyril Smith in this seat. Has she managed, like he did, to make a sort of impression on the community, get a hold on the community that stands her in good stead at a general election?
Well, when you talk to the Liberals agents, certainly that's the line. And yes, I think there is a feeling that she is a well-known national figure, not just locally, and she's been prominent in a number of local campaigns, which hasn't done her any harm at all. But up against her this time, Labour have put Lorna Fitzsimons, Fitzsimons, I beg your pardon, who is a rising star of the Blairite wing of the Labour Party. And she was born in Wardle, one of the wards which has moved into this constituency as a result of boundary changes. Now, whether that's a bit of a wild card in the calculations here, it's a bit early to say, but you know, may well have helped Labour.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, old Bexley Sidcup, the father of the House, the oldest candidate in this general election, the former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir Edward Heath, now 80 years old, looking hale and hearty, a staunch pro-European, very critical about the way that the Tory party has gone on Europe during the campaign, and likely to win his seat. So, Peter... Oh, and Jack Straw also is there. Yes, Jack Straw of Blackburn, the man who will be Home Secretary if he gets the job that he's been shadowing at his count in Blackburn. Has a majority of 6,000 there. It's the seat that Barbara Castle used to have, and he used to work for Barbara Castle as her assistant before he went into the House of Commons. Like many of these prominent Labour people, no real experience in government. They're all new to that. They'll all be on what is called a fast learning curve. Now, Peter Kellner, I'm told that you're getting reports from marginal constituencies about what's going on, and what's the picture you're picking up?
It's beginning to seep out. First of all, some more good news for the Liberal Democrats. It looks as if they've held Newbury and quite comfortably. That was a seat they won in a by-election from a couple of years ago. the significance of this is that at the last general election, the Conservatives won back all the seats they had lost in by-elections. It isn't going to happen this time. We're looking at perhaps a 5-figure majority for the Liberal Democrats there. Birmingham Edgbaston, Labour needs a 5% swing there. It looks like they've got that and with a lot to spare. 10, perhaps a 12% swing in Birmingham Edgbaston. Wolverhampton South West, another seat requiring a 5% swing for Labour to take it. Looks as though they've got that, and the significance of this is that Labour weren't at all sure that they would get Nick Budgen's seat. They thought that there would be local factors which would keep the swing down there, but they're now confident that they've taken that seat. And we add to that the reports we've had from Portsmouth, from Southgate, Mitcham and Morden, Angela Rumble's seat. They're saying there that the defeat for her is far worse than anybody was expecting. It does look as if the big swings are beginning to pile up in these marginal seats.
It's curious that, because they were very cautious from Mitcham and Morden when they were reporting it. But you're saying information now is that they're doing all right?
What we understand is that, that the Conservatives of Mitcham and Morden, they believe that they have been defeated more heavily than they were believing a few days ago.
OK, Peter, thank you very much indeed. We're joined by Carol Walker from Birmingham again. Carol, can you throw any more light on what's going on in the Midlands?
Well, certainly we're expecting a result in about the next 5 minutes from Edgbaston, which could be a very interesting result indeed. We're hearing it's looking very positive indeed, nothing definite yet, but very positive indeed for Gisela Stuart for the Labour Party. Now, this is a seat that has been a Tory seat since 1922, used to be Dame Jill Knight's. Andrew Marshall now the candidate for the Tory party, but we're hearing that it could be very positive for Gisela Stuart for the Labour Party, and that result due in about the next 5 minutes.
She had a rather odd campaign because she was born German, wasn't she, and is married to an Englishman. And there was some talk about on the doorsteps, people were saying, oh, you mustn't elect a German, and using rather rude a word about it.
Well, certainly, and I think there have been rumours that the Conservative Party were trying to exploit that. But I have to say that also the Labour Party have worked very hard indeed on the ground in this seat and in a number of others of these crucial West Midlands seats, which of course, as you've been hearing, as part of the key battleground. And the Labour Party have been working very hard to build up the support, and very hard throughout the day today to make sure that people actually go out and vote. And I'm sure that that must have helped to boost what we believe and expect to be a win for Labour here.
Carol Walker, thank you very much indeed. We're joined by William Hague now, the Secretary of State for Wales, who's at Conservative Party headquarters. Well, Mr Hague, people who might lead the Conservative Party have been breaking out and telling us what they think went wrong. What do you think went wrong?
Well, we've only got 4 results so far. We'll have to see how the rest of the results turn out. Clearly, they're not looking very good so far, but we'll have to see what happens with the rest of the results.
What do you think is to blame if the collapse of the Tory vote is as it seems? Is it divisions over Europe, or is it people just being fed up after 18 years of Conservative government?
Well, I think we've faced an opposition that has been prepared to say anything at all in order to get elected, and that has been a new phenomenon in this election. Even an opposition that has spoken some of the language of the Conservative Party in order to get elected. They have changed their image. We have yet to see whether they have actually changed their substance. Clearly, any appearance of division hasn't helped either. But I think the feeling of time for a change, which other people have referred to, has inevitably been difficult to combat, but we're proud of what we've achieved in this country over the last 18 years. If indeed we have lost the election, that doesn't mean we stop being proud of what we've achieved over the last 18 years. We have seen a significant change in the behaviour of the opposition.
Do you expect to be serving in a shadow cabinet led by John Major?
Well, I would hope so, but that would be up to him, of course. That is up to John Major, the leader of the Conservative Party.
After leading the Conservatives to what looks like the worst defeat since 1832, do you think he's in any position to go on leading them?
Yes, I have just been campaigning for weeks around the country, saying that he should be the Prime Minister of this country, and I don't regret a word of that. If I believe he should be the Prime Minister, I certainly believe he should be the leader of the Conservative Party.
Who let him down, then, in your party?
Well, as I say, I think the main factors at work have been a wider feeling in the country and a change in at least the image of the opposition in the country. But if people have let him down, then That is something that we have to look at over a longer period. I think we need a period of cool and calm reflection in the Conservative Party, if indeed the forecasts that we're hearing at the moment turn out to be correct.
Nicholas Winterton, you see, says that Kenneth Clarke was at fault and he lost the campaign.
Well, I don't think there's any point in apportioning blame around the party. We have to take a period of very cool and calm reflection. Of course, there are going to be lessons to be learned if indeed the forecasts that we have at the moment turn out to be correct. But that doesn't mean that we have a period of recrimination, and it doesn't mean that we stop being proud of what together we have achieved for this country, which is the best economic prospects in the lifetime of my generation. And the test of any Labour government would be whether they were still able to say that at the time of the next general election.
Michael Heseltine said that the electorate, just on the eve of the poll, would be walking to disaster if they voted Labour. Now, if they seem to have done it on the scale that the exit polls and the first results, it has to be said, are suggesting, do you think they sleptwalked into this, despite everything that you said during the campaign? Do you think they just took no notice of what the Tories were saying?
Well, whether they went asleep or awake, I certainly think that they would have gone on the road to disaster. I think the consequences of having a Labour government will become clear much faster than people think they might, if indeed that is what happens later this evening. I think it will be deeply damaging to this country, to its constitution, to its sovereignty, but that underlines the fact that the Conservative Party, if indeed, as I keep saying, these results turn out to be correct, must be instantly an effective opposition and must make sure that the probable follies of a Labour government in its early days would be exposed.
William Hague, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
William Hague, who might be the youngest challenger for the leadership, if there is a leadership battle. Sedgefield, and we're waiting for Tony Blair to arrive there at his count. Large crowd now gathered there. He had big crowds actually in the last 2 or 3 days of the campaign. It was a big crowd you probably saw in the marketplace. His father-in-law, the actor Tony Booth, from Till Death Do Us Part, arrived at the count a moment ago. He's, I think, would admit that he was old Labour rather than new Labour. As an actor, you remember, he used to be seen reading Militant, which is very much not New Labour. And here is Mr. Blair. Cherie, and one of his sons there, and John Burton, his agent. Well, Mr. Blair is looking now like a man who knows he's won. For the first time since this long campaign started, you can see on his face a kind of confidence and exuberance, Cherie, his wife, beside him there, that this time Labour's cracked it and that he is about to become Prime Minister. No words at the moment from the man who has been described as a safe pair of lips to lead the Labour Party, and what we shall see is whether he's actually a safe pair of hands. Alistair Campbell on the left there, his press secretary, who's been conducting this very, very carefully calculated campaign. One of the interesting things about the whole Blair campaign and New Labour is the degree to which it has been disciplined. And of course it's one thing to keep your party under control and bludgeon them into submission. It's quite another thing to bludgeon the civil service and bludgeon the country into submission to your will as Prime Minister. We've only seen him in control of the party. We haven't seen him as a politician making difficult decisions under pressure. So the first big tests will be in the weeks ahead, when he has to start actually acting and not speaking, as he's always said. There's a world of difference between deciding what to say and deciding what to do. His young son Ewan there, going into the count. The nearby seat of Houghton has been held, and we have the result, Houghton and Washington East. The new town of Washington is contained in this. Fraser Kemp, safe Labour seat, huge Labour vote, 76%, but the swing is the thing we want to see, and it's 9%. So once again, the swing pretty much in line. And Tony Blair now arrives inside the count, applauded by his own little group of party workers there. The teller's, of course, completely independent behind, mainly bank clerks and clerical workers who are paid to come here and get on with the job of the count itself. Well, a very informal scene. In a matter of hours, Tony Blair as Prime Minister will be taken over by the whole machinery of government and the list of decisions that he has to take. But that hasn't happened yet. Power doesn't pass until the Prime Minister goes to Buckingham Palace with his resignation to the Queen, and Tony Blair is summoned there sometime tomorrow and then takes over the seals of office and can then start appointing his cabinet. But anyway, at the moment he's among friends in Sedgefield, where he's been the MP for a long time, unexpectedly leader of the party after John Smith's death, unexpectedly indeed the MP for Sedgefield as a result of John Burton's late last-minute intervention in 1983. So we'll go back there when we get the result. In the meantime, Jeremy.
David, well, I'm joined now by two of the shadow cabinet. Looks as if they're shortly going to be members of the real cabinet, Jack Straw and Robin Cook. Jack Straw, are you expecting to be Home Secretary?
Well, my answer to that is the same as the one you received from Gordon Brown about half an hour ago, is that we'll wait and see, when all of us would be delighted to serve in any position in a Tony Blair cabinet. It's a tremendous achievement if, as it appears to be, we are on course for a great victory, an achievement above all by Tony Blair.
But he can't sack the man who ran his campaign for the leadership, can he?
Well, it's entirely speculation by you, right, Jeremy. I'm sorry I can't hear you very well, by the way. But
let me ask you another question.
Please do.
If you really have won by something of landslide proportions, doesn't it indicate that you really didn't need to throw out a lot of the things you profess to believe in?
That we didn't, or that we did?
That you did not need to throw out as many of the policies as you did.
It's not a question of throwing out policies that we did not believe in. Our values have stayed the same. What has been crucial, however, and it's shown in the difference between today's result and that in 1992, was that we had to modernise the methods that the party was attached to. Now, that's the change that Tony Blair has managed to achieve, and it's a change which, by all the indications of the polls tonight, is one which is backed by a near majority, absolute majority of the British people.
And how long before we see child curfews, Mr. Straw?
Well, they are in the manifesto. They're called child protection orders. Tony Blair himself announced that in the first Queen's speech there would be a crime and disorder bill, and those will form part of that.
Right. Robin Cook, do you think your success, or apparent success, or incipient success this time, indicates that perhaps you could have won in 1992 had you done things like Jack Straw wanted to do, like chucking out Clause 4?
Well, it'd be very nice to replay history, and perhaps we could go back to 1983 and decide how we could have won that one. But we're actually fighting the election in 1997, and I think you saw one of the reasons why we are winning, and winning so handsomely, earlier, just before you turned this interview, and that was the tremendously warm ovation which Tony Blair got on arriving at the Sedgefield count. But he has led from the front, he has led a united party behind him, and he has offered Britain a leadership that Britain sorely needs.
How much do you not accept, though, that this was a case of the Conservatives losing it by being hopelessly divided rather than you winning it?
Oh, Jeremy, I think this is a time to be magnanimous. It would be churlish to deny the Conservative Party their part in our victory tonight. But it wasn't all down to the Conservative Party, far from it. One of the reasons why we are winning is that we are winning because we talked about the issues that affect the real families of Britain, the health service, the education service, our commitments to cut class sizes, to cut waiting lists, to cut the dole queues, to cut crime. They rang bells with the ordinary people out there, and that's why they've turned out in large numbers to vote for those policies.
And you reckon you will be able to be more radical in government than you've been during the campaign?
I think that once people see those policies put into action, they will recognise that it is going to create a Britain which is a fair society, which has an open democracy, and in which the economy is run to provide opportunity for the many, not privilege for the few. And yes, that's a radical vision.
Robin Cook and you, Jack Straw, thanks both very much. Thank you.
Well, we're joined now by Francine Stock, who's at the Royal Festival Hall. Francine, they were a bit squeamish about this. It's a celebration party, isn't it?
Well, it is a celebration party, and certainly within the last half hour or so, it has begun to sound like one. It was pretty quiet to start with. It kicked off at 11 o'clock. They're expecting up to about 1,800 guests, and we gather that Dareem will be playing later on, and indeed there's going to be disc jockey and music. And I must say that certainly the mood is becoming more buoyant by the moment. Choice of the Festival Hall, of course, is quite significant, as it was centrepiece of the Festival of Britain, one of the great dreams itself of the post-war Labour government.
Coming there later on tonight?
Sorry, David.
Is Tony Blair coming there later on tonight?
Indeed he is, yes. Obviously after his own result, he'll then come down to London and will arrive here, and we're expecting that he will speak to people both outside and indeed inside the hall. And with me, I do actually have one of the early celebrants here at the Labour celebration, Richard Branson, Virgin Supremo. Good evening. Now, I must say, up until now, people have been saying that you've been sitting on the fence. You've talked to both sides. You appear to be still sitting on the fence the weekend. You jumped off it pretty smartly this evening. You were here at about 11:30.
Well, I still haven't sort of declared who I voted for, but I think Labour have many policies which we've supported, which we've come out and said that we do support. Tonight's an historic night, and they've been good enough to invite us and other people down, and we're here to wish them well and hope that they have a very successful 5 years in office, and I think they're going to need all the support they can get.
So it's a question of pragmatism rather than conviction in your case?
Well, I may or may not have voted for them, but as I've said in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's many policies which I feel that they've got it right and where the Tories have got it wrong. I think the Tories got it right on things like privatisation. I think on issues like health, trying to stop kids from starting to smoke, trying to direct some of the lottery money to health and education. There's a whole list of things where I think Labour have got it right, and I would love to help them and give them their support.
But as a businessman, given that the indications are at the moment that Labour is going to have a substantial majority, do you have any concerns that they may be more radical in government than perhaps they have suggested in the campaign?
Well, I think everything they've said in the campaign is very good. I mean, they've talked about being a pro-competitive government. They're going to bring in pro-competition policies, maybe even be more pro-competitive than the Tories. They're not going to try to change some of the more radical moves that the Tories made, which I think were good for this country. But hopefully they will do things as a united party. The Tories were not united. And I think the country needs a party that is united. I think with Tony Blair having a big majority, he's got the mandate to go ahead and take this country forward the next 5 years. And it desperately, I think, needed that now.
Now, your organisation obviously prospered under the free enterprise of the Thatcherite and later the Majorite years. Will you have any words of concern? I mean, is there anything that you want to warn against?
Well, I think, as Tony Blair has said, that and he definitely does, he believes in free enterprise. He believes in entrepreneurism. Everything he has said, I think, there's very little one can question. He's got an incredibly difficult job because he's taken on the lowest inflation this country's had for years. He's taken on very low unemployment. He's taken on very high...
Those are good things, surely, to take.
No, he's taken on a record which is financially very good. And so to beat that is going to be very difficult. But I think the areas where hopefully he can win through is making decisions with slightly more of a heart than perhaps the Tories did in the past.
Richard Branson, thank you very much. Back to you, David.
Francine, thanks very much. We'll be down there for the festivities of the festival hall right through the night. And no doubt when those 1,800 or whatever it was people arrive, there'll be quite some scenes with Dee Ream playing. This is the result so far, with 6 results in. Conservatives have none, Labour on 6 at the moment. Those will stack up over the night, and the right hand, on your right-hand screen, you'll see the pluses or minuses of the gains or losses. We haven't yet had one of those, but we are waiting for Birmingham Edgbaston to come in. We think that will be the next marginal seat, which will give us an indication of how, in these key areas, Labour's doing. Barnsley Central, we have the result in. That's the 6th result that's come in. Barnsley Central, 24,500 Labour majority. This is the old headquarters of the NUM, still the headquarters when it was more powerful. A completely Conservative free zone, 70% Labour vote, and a swing of 7% from the Conservatives to Labour. Birmingham Edgbaston, the candidates there waiting for the count. Gisela Stewart, remember, for Labour, is hoping to take the seat from Andrew Marshall, the Conservative, the candidate there. James Dill Knight has retired after 30 years, and he's moved into the seat. Edgbaston is in the sort of leafy Birmingham suburbs. It includes the famous cricket ground and Birmingham University, an area which normally would be a very safe Conservative seat.
Not putting it very high.
Neil Hamilton, arriving with his wife Christine at the count at Tatton.
National ones.
What happens in Tatton?
Good turnout.
And she talking as ever?
From Wrexham, and
Oh no, he is
if we
talking.
do as well as we did in Wrexham, we'll survive.
You mean just a 7% swing against you?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty optimistic.
Who knows?
Well, we'll soon find out. Hang on.
All
Contain
right, thanks
yourself.
very much. We'll look forward to it very much.
Okay, bye.
Vivian White, our reporter down there at Tatton. And William Waldegrave, Chief Secretary of the Treasury at his count in Bristol West. This could be an anxious night for him. Let's go for the declaration from Birmingham Edgbaston.
Edgbaston constituency is as follows. Derek Lawrence Campbell, the British Democratic Party candidate, 443. James Young, known as Jock Gallagher, Liberal Democrat, 4,691. Andrew Marshall, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,712. Jonathan Paul Oakton, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,065. Gisela Stewart, the Labour Party, 23,000.
That tells it all, the smile on her face. This is a seat that's never fallen to Labour. And this is the Basildon of the 1997 election. There it is in Sedgefield. They're all applauding and waving their balloons at this first Labour gain of the night. Birmingham Edgbaston, Labour majority, 4,800 from a 5,000 Conservative majority last time. For Gisela Stewart.
Elected Member of Parliament for the Birmingham Edgbaston constituency.
And the swing, 10% from Conservative to Labour in Birmingham Edgbaston. There it is, the first Labour gain of the night.
I'd like to thank the people of Edgbaston for entrusting me with being their first ever Labour Member of Parliament. Britain has turned away from the Tories, but this is not a time to look back. Today we look forward to life with a new Labour government that can rebuild Britain as one nation. A new Labour government that will serve Britain in the interest of all the people and not just the privileged few. We have said in this campaign that Britain deserves better. The people have agreed. Now Labour must make sure that Britain really does get better. There's a lot to be done. We won't get Britain back on its feet next week or the week after. But Tony Blair will be starting the job first thing tomorrow morning. This result has set Britain on course for a brighter future. We will look back on May the 1st, 1997, as the day education became Britain's first priority, as the day we started a real attack on unemployment, and as the day the NHS was saved.
So there's the victor, the first victor of the night. We've had some more results come in. Let's see those. Labour holds in Manchester Blakely. The swing is what's interesting here. Again, 9% swing from Conservative to Labour. Bootle, very depressed, run-down part of the country. Labour, very safe seat for them with a majority of 28,000 this time. Slightly smaller swing and a very low turnout there. 66% turnout. Now we go to Rushcliffe, where Fred Emery has the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kenneth Clarke, with him. Fred.
Yes, well, David, with me as the Chancellor, still the Chancellor for another day, of course.
Certainly.
Waiting here for his count, and he's also waited to give any interviews here until at least there was one Conservative seat. With the loss of Edgbaston there, do you really accept the game is up?
It looks as though I'm going to be sharing the disappointment of everybody else who's been working for the Conservative Party in the last few weeks. So it's ever more likely as the minutes go by that we have lost, that the end of 18 years of, I think, very successful Conservative government have come, and people have chosen to go to a new Labour government, and we have to see what new Labour is really like in office.
Why do you think it was when, as Chancellor, either by luck or judgment, you actually had some success with the economy, which normally decides elections?
Well, I think in this election, undoubtedly, there's been far too little about the economy and our economic prospects, far too much about Europe. But controlling the agenda is very difficult in modern elections. It veered about. Some days it, I think, became positively frivolous. But everybody involved in the election, including the journalists who report it, play a part in that. And had we had more on the economy and a little less on Europe and a lot less on sleaze, I think we might have done better.
You probably know already that at least one of your former colleagues, and others, of course, already in the Conservative press, actually blame you single-handedly for losing this election on the grounds that you ruled out this option of ruling out joining the single currency.
Right.
And Nick Budgeon, it wasn't Nick Budgeon, excuse me, it was Nicholas Winterton said that you be remembered or reviled in history for this.
Well, that wouldn't be Nick Budgeon, that would be Nick Winterton. The position is, I think most people who work for the Conservative Party, particularly the voluntary workers, would say they hope the Parliamentary Party in the next Parliament behaves rather more sensibly than the Parliamentary Party did sometimes in the last Parliament. And we do need to have to get together as a sensible, united party in order to rebuild from what looks like quite a serious redress. The idea that almost 50% of the public are voting Labour because we are not right-wing and Eurosceptic enough is a theory that Nick Winterton can no doubt cling to. I tell you now, and you could tell me which newspapers will tell everybody that tomorrow, but I think that generally members of the general public regard that as rather unlikely. But for us to fall to mutual recriminations at any time will be folly. For people within 2 hours of the polls closing to start going into mutual recriminations is extreme folly, and I do think the party needs to compose itself, lose with dignity, look at itself and decide how to make itself more appealing and how to be a good opposition.
We'll come back to you later, Chancellor. Thank you very much.
The result from Portsmouth North, Peter Griffiths, the Conservative.
72. Peter John Coe, UK Independence Party, 298. Sean Bonham Carter Evely, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,757. Peter Harry Steve Griffiths, Conservative Party candidate, 17,016 votes. Sydney Norman John Rapson, the Labour Party candidate, 21,339. Stephen Roy Sollitt, Liberal Democrat, 4,788. And I declare that Sydney Norman John Rapson has been duly elected to serve as the Member of Parliament for the Portsmouth North constituency.
Well, there is a very good result for Labour. Their second gain of the night. Peter Griffiths, once dubbed the parliamentary leper by Harold Wilson for a racist campaign he fought in the Midlands, has lost this seat, and the swing is a huge 14%.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's traditional that I give thanks to a number of people, but clearly tonight is a momentous occasion for us in the Labour Party in Portsmouth. We see the dawn of a new beginning at last for a better country. May I thank, therefore, the police, the returning officers and their staff, done a magnificent job today, the campaign team, and I'll say more about that later.
Well, he's a local Portsmouth councillor and about to embark on a formal speech of thanks, unlike the one we heard from Birmingham, which was a fairly feisty defence of Labour. News that Labour claiming they're going to take Crosbury, Tories in Liverpool, Wavertree say they're going to be struggling to save their deposit, and the Liberal Democrats look as though they may lose Rochdale to Labour. But at this point, we've had 12 results in. Let's have a look at our forecast. Peter.
Right, now here is the blue mountain that Labour had to climb. All these blue seats in the last Parliament, and how many have declared? Let's have a look and see how many have declared. Here we're looking now at the results in so far. Most of them grey, undeclared. There's Birmingham Edgbaston, number 82, has gone for the Labour Party, so it's a gain way beyond the winning post, if you remember, that Labour had to get to. So now let's look at our swingometer. Here it is. These are the blue Conservative seats vulnerable to a swing along this red arc here. And here is the average swing so far. That's the 4.5% Labour have got to reach to get an overall majority. But the average swing is twice that, way beyond there. Something just over 9.5% is the average swing in the seats so far. That would see Labour with a majority of something like 100. But the Birmingham Edgbaston swing is a little bit higher than that. And the Portsmouth North swing is a whole 14%. So you can see that in the seats the Conservatives are defending, things look much better than they look in the safer Labour seats. So on the basis of all that, let's just first of all look at what would happen if we forecast, so we project here very quickly for you, just what would happen on the basis of that average swing in all the seats. Paddy Ashton with 25, Mr Major with 227, and Mr Blair unquestionably there with 379. But now we can show you, on the basis of the seats that matter, the Conservative seats, biasing our forecast towards the seats in which this election will be decided, seats like Portsmouth North and Edgbaston, here is our first forecast. 41 Liberal Democrats, 176, rather fewer for John Major, 415 Labour MPs under Tony Blair, a Labour majority of 171 in the new Parliament. David.
Tony King, what do you make of that? That's a sensational result if that forecast is borne out.
Oh, absolutely amazing. One of the things that's striking about the conversations that have taken place so far is all this talk of time for a change, as though all that had happened is that the clock had run out for the Conservative government. One of the things I think the Tories are going to have to take on board is that they didn't lose this election simply because they'd been in power for 18 years. They lost the election because of the way they comported themselves in power.
OK, let's hear now from Gisela Stewart, who was the first victor of the night for Labour. She's with Carol Walker at Birmingham Edgbaston.
Yes, Gisela Stewart, congratulations. Why do you think you won this seat, which has been a Conservative seat since 1922? Was it just that people were fed up with the Tories?
No, I think it went much deeper. It was a kind of total disillusionment, but also they had lost trust. And I see the Labour victory as one of an opportunity to restore that trust between the people and politicians.
We're looking there at predictions of a Labour majority of 171 seats in Parliament. What sort of a Labour government do you think that would be?
I think what that means is it allows us to put into practice our plans for restoring the NHS, for making education our first priority, and all the other reforms we are planning to put into place. We can actually put them into place very effectively.
There's going to be a great deal of expectations on people like yourself, aren't there?
Well, but we also will have a very large number of women in Parliament, and this is one of the most exciting aspects of the new Parliament as far as I'm concerned.
Gisela Stewart, thanks very much indeed. That's Gisela Stewart here, the winner at Edgbaston.
Good, well, let's have a look at some results we've had in keeping track of this sensational victory for the Labour Party. Birmingham, Ladywood, Claire Short, one of the most popular and outspoken members of the Shadow Cabinet, and she has a swing of a more modest 5%, and a very low turnout, 54% turnout in Birmingham Ladywood, extraordinarily low. Ashton-under-Lyne, Labour hold that seat. Robert Sheldon, his majority 22,000, a biggish swing there in Ashton-under-Lyne. He's been 32 years as an MP. He's chairman of the Public Accounts Committee there. And Worley, another safe Labour seat. They get 63% of the vote here. Conservatives in second place, and the swing again 10.5%. The third Labour gain of the night in Crosby, the seat Shirley Williams once held for the SDP, and Sir Malcolm Thornton defeated here on a huge swing, 18% swing. Next door to Bootle, that in the affluent part of the northwest, should be safe for the Conservatives, falls on an 18% swing from Conservative to Labour. And incidentally, the Liberal Democrat vote goes down and may well have helped make that swing as big as it is. Liberal Democrats voting for Labour in order to get the Conservatives out. So that's the third Conservative defeat of the night. In Brent, Dr. Rhodes Boyson, Sir Rhodes Boyson, the former headmaster, looking a bit worried there in Brent, disconsolate figure. Norwich North, we're expecting a Labour gain up there. Norwich North is a fairly tight marginal. People crowded round anxiously. This is a very bad moment of the night. Just after midnight, a lot of seats being declared in the next couple of hours. James Goldsmith, Sir James Goldsmith, who founded the Referendum Party, arriving looking extremely cheerful at Putney. And he spent a very large amount of money all over the country to try and get a referendum party going which would allow us to vote on whether we should or shouldn't stay in the European Union. Michael Burke.
So James, early days yet, of course, but are you disappointed by your results so far?
No, you've got to understand, what are we? We're a pressure group. We didn't seek power for ourselves at any time. Our purpose was to break the unanimity of silence that existed and to get a debate on Europe. We managed to obtain that debate. Europe is number one issue in this election. It's become the European election. All the parties who refused referenda to start off with have become referendum parties. The Conservatives send out documents saying, we are the referendum party. Mr. Blair writes in The Sun, we are the referendum party. Mr. Ashton says we're the referendum party. We're all referendum parties. And they have all rejected the Euro-federalist policies, and they have all committed themselves to rejecting the single European state.
But on that basis, does it matter to you whether your candidates get votes at all?
Well, it matters to me only in this respect, that we want to have a movement so as to make certain that the politicians who have made these promises, who have rejected Euro-federalism, and who have now said they're going to be against a federal state, that they respect that they give us the referenda, and that they remember that none of the parties have a mandate from this election to take us into a federal Europe, because they have all campaigned against it. And if they don't respect their commitments, we want to have people up and down the country who are angry and committed to ensuring that those politicians respect their words.
And your personal chances here, have you any idea how they go?
Extremely low.
Again, thanks very much indeed. See you later on.
Well, that's the first frank remark we've heard from a candidate tonight as they wait for their results to come through. The Liberal Democrats have pretty much conceded they've lost Rochdale to Labour, or it looks as though they have. But on the other hand, they appear to have had Sheffield Hallam conceded to them by the Tories. So Liberal Democrats look as though they've taken Sheffield Hallam. Let's have a look at three more results. Again, we're looking at the scale of this victory. Eccles, 11% swing from Conservative to Labour. This is in the Salford part, just to the west of Manchester. And Salford itself, a 9% swing. Hazel Blears takes this. And Worsley, safe Labour seat south of Bolton, again an 8% swing. All the time, the swing, even at 8%, double what they needed to get an overall majority for Labour. So, Peter, how are these marginals turning out at the moment? I mean, we've got them moving a bit, but there's some... I mean, that 18% one is extraordinary.
Quite extraordinary. Look, here is our swingometer with all the old seats coloured up in blue for Conservative over here, red for Labour over here. Now, watch which ones have actually declared. Here we go. I'm going to press my little button now. There we are. They're flashed up, and there are the safe Labour ones declaring for Labour. There's Birmingham Edgbaston, there's Portsmouth North, and there's Crosby. See what swings it would require: 10.5% for Crosby, 9% for Portsmouth, 5% for Birmingham Edgbaston to go. But now let's bring back all the undeclared seats now, all the undeclared red and blue seats, and see what the swing in those three marginals is looking like. Here he goes, turning an awful lot of other blue seats red as well. This is what's going to happen in these vital marginal seats if these three are typical. Something like 12%, and in Crosby, the furthest one here, it was 18%. It's off the end here somewhere. So let's just tip up now and see what the 12%, the rough average there, would sort out for us. And you can see that's why we were forecasting something like 150, but it's moving up all the time. Our forecast will be changing within minutes. David.
Peter, thank you very much. Let's now hear from John Simpson, who's with Alistair Campbell. John.
Well, David, a moment or two ago, about half an hour ago actually, Tony Blair came here. He wouldn't say anything, but with us at the moment for an informal chat, I'm told, is Alistair Campbell, his press spokesman. Alistair, you've won, haven't you?
Well, Mr. Blair's constituency is not yet declared, but I think we're having a pretty good night.
I mean, there's Peter Snow saying possible majority of 171.
Well, I would doubt that, but I think it's fair to say we've had a very good campaign and we're having a very good night.
Well, I mean, 171 is a bit more than...
Well, I would doubt we get a majority of 171, but it's quite clear we've had a very good night.
Can I tempt you to saying how much?
No.
But, I mean, it's going to be substantial.
Well, it looks like we've had a good night.
It's going to be a problem, though, isn't it? All governments with big majorities have problems.
Well, I think if you don't mind, we'll stick on one night and we'll get through tonight, which seems to be a success, and then we'll think about whatever problems may lie ahead.
Why, though, do you think you won? What was it about the campaign? Did you do so well? Did the Conservatives do so badly? What was it?
Well, I don't know whether the campaign in the end made that much difference. Maybe people just made up their minds, but I think the Conservatives certainly made a mistake in trying to target Tony in the way that they did, because that was a battle they were always going to lose. I mean, people know the strength of character that is there and the vision and the purpose, and that came out over a long campaign. I think the long campaign rebounded against them. I think we had a great campaign at every level. I thought Tony was on great form. I thought John Prescott had a brilliant campaign. Gordon Brown running things from Millbank, the whole Millbank Tower operation under Peter Mandelson, and the integration of the shadow cabinet as well. And I think really important as well is our organisation on the ground. We have got fantastic organisation on the ground now. And the truth is we've supplanted the Conservatives as the professional party in British politics.
Well, it doesn't sound very much like bitter introspection there. Back to you, David.
Thanks, John. They sound very downbeat, Labour, tonight, as though they weren't quite sure. Perhaps they know something that we don't know, but I can't believe it. But very cautious about acknowledging any victory at the moment. No sign of exuberance. Liz Lynn has conceded, incidentally, that she's lost Rochdale to Labour. We haven't got the result out yet. It'll be some time before it comes. We've got some more results in. Let's just have a look at those. Tyne Bridge, 11% swing. This is a Labour hold, of course. Safe seat. Barnsley West and Penistone, again Labour hold, a smaller swing there, 5%, where Arthur Scargill lives. Oldham West and Royton, Michael Meacher, who may or may not be in the Labour cabinet. He's on the shadow cabinet. There's been some doubt about whether he'll survive in his job as Environment Secretary. One of the few people who actually served in the Wilson and the Callaghan governments as a minister. 12% swing, very big swing. We go down to Yeovil now,
forward with our policies for health and
Paddy
education.
Ashdown is
We'll use those in the next
giving an interview again.
That's what we deliver.
The exit polls are looking and suggesting, and so are the early results, that it will in fact be a landslide victory for Labour.
You really can't tell, and I think we should wait till the British public's votes are counted rather than the exit poll, interesting though they are. Thank you all very much
Final
indeed.
question, are you getting any reports of your own party's performance from your...
As far as I can tell, it looks to me as though we're going to be on a good...
It seems a statement every half hour from Mr. Ashdown at the moment. Well, we've now had 20 results in, 22 results in, actually, as I speak, and this is how things stand. Based on that, the biggest ever Labour majority of 193 after 23 results now in, is what we're saying just after 12:30. And this is the vote on which it's based. Labour running now at 45%, Conservatives 31%, Liberal Democrats 17%, others on 7%. It's a slight increase in the Conservative vote, a couple of percent or so from what we first predicted. Labour gains in Birmingham, Edgbaston, Portsmouth North and Crosby. Those are the three that have come through so far. The Shadow Chancellor Gordon Brown, it's not just a rejection of the Conservatives, it's about New Labour and a new type of politics. Kenneth Clarke, the Chancellor, had we had more on the economy and a little less on Europe, a little less on sleaze, then we might have done better. Sir James Goldsmith of the Referendum Party speaking in Putney. None of the parties have a mandate from this election to take us into Europe because they've all campaigned against it. And this is how the news has been coming through to us. Well, they're supporters of Liz Lynn in Rochdale being comforted. Obviously very upsetting. There's Liz Lynn herself comforting one of her own supporters in Rochdale, where she's conceded that she's lost the seat to Labour. The first editions of the newspapers are coming through. The youngest Prime Minister since 1801, says the Express, biggest turnaround by voters since 1945. Tories head for greatest defeat ever. It's Blair. The Guardian, Labour's victory charge. The Telegraph, Blair set for huge majority. The Mail, a landslide for Labour. The Mirror, Blair heading for landslide poll victory. And I don't know why, but I don't happen to have a copy of The Sun here, which was the newspaper that, surprisingly, Rupert Murdoch's paper came out in favour of Tony Blair. But I do have the Morning Star. Real work starts now as Labour cites victory, the left says. Peter.
David, we're going to open the doors of the House of Commons now and see what the new shape of the House of Parliament will be. On the opposition benches, Mr Major with, how many MPs? 151, fewer than they've had since the war. Next door to him, Paddy Ashdown, his best hopes realised with no less than 49 Liberal Democrats, 28 the others, 28. Here is the winning post that Mr Blair needs to get through, is to get an overall majority. And now rushing towards it, all those red figures for the Labour MPs who are now way over the victory, the winning post, 431 of them, 431 of them. You subtract the opposition total from that and you get Labour with a majority of 203, David.
Thanks very much, Peter. And let's now go down to Basildon. We were hoping to join Mark Mardell there. This is one of the target seats for Labour that they'll very easily get, in truth, on these sort of swings. 2.19% is all they needed. Mark, can you fill us in on what's going on there? No, I think you can't. We just see the publicity for Basildon. Anyway, that was the seat that was marked the victory last time round, and we're told it's a very big victory for Labour that's going to come through here when the returning officer declares. Yes, Mark, I can hear you. Far away.
Oh, jolly good. Because the reason that we're looking at the stage is because they're actually about to come onto the stage at the moment and hear the declaration. But what we're hearing is that Essex man and Essex woman have gone across to Labour in quite a big way. When David Amess won last time, there was a majority of around 1,500. We think that Labour are going to get a majority of 10,000. Quite an incredible result here, we believe, tonight. And they are actually just coming onto the stage at the moment, and we'll be able to hear from them, the returning officer, very shortly indeed, I think, David.
Of course, these boundaries, I haven't gone through the details of it, they've all changed a bit, and David Amess left because the Basildon constituency's boundaries were altered, as 2/3 of the constituencies have been altered at these elections, trying to get them all to pretty much the same size, and it reduced the potential for the Conservatives, or he thought it would, and in fact, I think in theory it didn't, and he moved off anyway to Southend.
I, being the returning officer for the Basildon constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. John Charles Barron, Conservative, 16,366. Lindsay Granshaw, Liberal Democrat, 4,608. Craig Barry Robinson, Referendum Party, 2,462. Angela Evans Smith, Labour, 29,646. And that Angela Evans Smith has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
So Basildon deserts the Conservatives and goes Labour. And just look at the swing in Basildon. 15% swing from Conservative to Labour in Basildon. Angela Smith takes it.
The Basildon result was announced in 1992. But tonight's spectacular result makes it clear that 18 years of Tory government has now ended. This is the beginning of a new era in British politics. In Basildon and in Britain, Labour has come home. We'll now have a Labour government concerned for the many, not just a few. Government has confidence in the future that's not lost in the past, and a government that believes that Britain deserves better.
Gibson,
Norwich
Ian,
North result
Labour.
being declared here without the candidates.
27,346. Hood, James Anthony.
Socialist Labour.
495. Kinghorn, Robert Richard Francis.
Conservative.
17,876. Marks, Dennis Howard.
Legalise cannabis.
512. Mills, Diana Betty Linda.
Natural Law Party.
100. And Young, Paul Robert Malcolm.
Liberal Democrat.
6,951. There were 165 spoilt ballot papers. I therefore declare Ian Gibson elected to serve as Member of Parliament for Norwich North.
A 10.6 swing, 11% swing in Norwich North gives that seat to Labour. Dunfermline East, Gordon Brown has won his seat and is speaking. Let's hear him.
All those who have counted the votes this evening, the police and everybody in the council in Fife, for the very fast and efficient way that this poll has been conducted this evening. I want also to thank my fellow candidates for the keenly fought contest that we have enjoyed and for the sporting way that this contest has been conducted. I want to thank particularly those people in the Labour Party who not only during this contest but over the last 3 contests have helped me and helped the Labour Party achieve this great result this evening. This result, which is now being repeated in almost every corner of the country, is not just a verdict against Conservative rule. It is a clear and decisive endorsement of the desire of the people of this country for a new politics that breaks free of the old divisions, for the unity of a country that can tackle the real social problems in our midst, and for a government that will equip this country for the great challenges of the future, from a platform of stability and investment, tackling the huge challenges that every modern industrial country faces. For 18 years, I believe the people of this constituency and the people of Britain have yearned for a government that is on their side. And if the verdict of the people is as it looks round the country this evening, then I believe that under Tony Blair's magnificent leadership, the Labour Party is now ready to rebuild the bond of trust between the British people and their government. And I look forward to the days ahead when we can begin as a Labour Party.
So the new Chancellor of the Exchequer and Nick Budgen's seat in Wolverhampton South West being declared.
I declare that the total number of votes given for each candidate
at this election was as follows. Nicholas William Budgeon,
Conservative,
19,539. Matthew Roger Green,
Liberal Democrat,
4,012. Michael Stephen Hyde,
Liberal,
713. Jennifer Grace Jones,
Labour,
24,657. And I declare that Jennifer Grace Jones has been elected Member of Parliament for this constituency.
Wolverhampton South West, Enoch Powell's old seat and Nick Budgeon's seat, ever since 1974, falls to Labour. Big majority, 5,000, a swing of 10%. Wolverhampton South West goes to Labour.
Thank you. This is a wonderful result, it really is. It's beyond my wildest dreams, I have to be honest. It was achieved through a great deal of hard work on behalf of myself, my agent and the campaign team. And I thank them all for the hard work that they have put in to achieve this result. I also thank my...
There is a recount in Torbay where Michael Allison is defending his seat against, we think, a Liberal Democrat challenge. And Stirling, interestingly, is reported as too close to call. Rupert Allison, I should have said. Stirling is too close to call. Michael Forsyth, Secretary of State, defending there, and that might be rather good news for him because it would fall on a very small swing against him. Liberal Democrats have gained Southport, as we reported a little while ago. They were likely to do. Matthew Banks, the Conservative, is out. And Ronnie Fern, who nobody thought would take it, he's a former pantomime Dane, the Liberal Democrat Dame, and the Liberal Democrats themselves didn't think that he'd take it, but anyway, he has, and his majority is 6,000. He's had that seat before. Now, Peter, let's have a look, shall we, at the battleground?
Terrifying sight for the Conservatives, David. That's where Labour and the Liberal Democrats had to reach, Loughborough. That would have been a Labour majority. Here are the results in so far. Colouring up the seats, how much of it's staying blue, right the way across here into the 5th, 6th, 7th column. Crosby's gone red. We've got no blue on the battleground at all in the results in so far. Let's forecast the way they're going to go on the basis of the swings in all these important critical seats that we're going to decide it. Look at all the gold and yellow for SNP as well as red for Labour that's going up those first 4 columns, and the 5th and the 6th, and largely up the 7th as well. Now, the thing to do is to bunch them all together so that we get a clear picture of how far Labour is going to get beyond the winning post. They're filling 3, 4, 5 and a half, 5 3/4 columns. The rest of it is totally full of Liberal Democrat potential gains, forecast gains, and then the SNP going right off the top of our battleground. Now, that will mean, if that's anything like the way it's going to go, and now, of course, we are pretty certain of our forecast, but we've got enough results in to be pretty certain it's going to be a landslide for Mr. Blair. Just where is he now? Let's go into number 10, open the door, and see how securely he will be in number 10. But there's no question about this. At least 5, certainly the full 5 years if he wants to. 191 majority forecast for Labour. David.
The man who helped devise that victory has won in Hartlepool, again with a big swing, 11%, and is speaking at the moment.
With very many others in our party, for 10 years, to arrive at the point at which the people of Britain feel able to put their trust and their faith once again in a Labour government, and that is what has happened today. And I know why they've done it. They've not only turned their back on the drift and the dogma and the divisions of the Tory years, they have voted Labour because they like New Labour, they like what they stand for, they like our courage, they like our confidence, they like our convictions, and they like us to govern this country for the many and not just the few. They want
the first London seat to declare, Battersea in South London.
Democrat, 3,482. Linton Martin,
Conservative seat this,
Labour
at the
Party,
moment.
24,000. And 47. Marshall Joseph, Rainbow Dream Ticket Party, 127. Slater Mark Referendum Party, 804. And that Martin Linton has been duly elected to serve as the member for Battersea.
Guardian journalist Martin Linton defeats John Bowis, the health minister, junior health minister here, with a big swing. 10%. First London result and a loss for the Tories. Portsmouth South.
Liberal Democrat, 20,421.
That's Mike Hancock, the Liberal Democrat, who's taken this seat.
David John Patterson Martin, the Conservative Party candidate, 16,094. John Christopher Thompson, the Liberal Party candidate, 184. William Arthur Trend, the Natural Law Party, 140. Christopher Gregory Trim, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,629. And I declare that Michael Thomas Hancock has been duly elected to serve as the Member of Parliament for the Portsmouth South constituency.
He used to be Labour, he became SDP, he took the seat at a by-election, lost it again, and now he holds Portsmouth South.
Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, first of all I have to thank all of the team who've worked so wondrously well, not over the